Now, she is our opening keynote. Now, Judy, I've actually known her for, I won't say how many years, but I didn't have grey hair then when we first met last week. But no, Judy is fantastic. She had a fantastic career. She was very much working in business. Then she actually was working in running IT, working her IT training company. That actually unbelievably led her into the radio presenting. So she has been for many years, 20 years plus, sorry, I shouldn't have said the number of years, should I? A number of years as a radio presenter and a very, very good presenter, not to mention giving some fantastic webinars. So at that stage, what I would like to do is to actually pass across to Judy. And I know that she's got a lot of fantastic slides and a lot of very interesting points and information that she's collected, which fits in very much with this section, which is all about society that follows this keynote. And very much a lot of the points that Judy is coming up with, you think, my goodness, yes, this is all true, unfortunately. Unfortunately, there's a positive and the negative side, isn't there? Of
Yes.
the way what we've actually lived through in the last 2 years. So at that stage, what I'd like to do is pass across onto Julie Goodlett and say thank you so much for being our opening keynote for day 2. Over to you.
Oh,
Julie.
Margaret, thank you. Let us hope this works. If I just click that. Oh, I thought it would be better than that. There.
That looks great.
Hello, and welcome to my presentation. Do you know, one of the things I find really hard, Margaret always says, I'll say a little bit, then you introduce yourself. And I always think, what on earth am I going to say as an introduction? My daughter mentioned this on Facebook last night, and she mentioned that I was a badass computer geek. So I thought I might go with that. I'm a badass computer geek. I've also been a computer observer for a very long time. So let's say I'm an old bat as a computer observer and have had the privilege not just to observe, but to participate in the development really of technology at work for a long time, let's say from the early 70s, when all sorts of bits and pieces were happening. I have a confession, well really I have 2 confessions. I found this one of the hardest presentations ever to put together. And one of the reasons for that is that it's so all embracing of a terrible time. And I know that I will not be able to mention or to thank or to recognise everybody and everything that has been going on. But I know that we all feel heartfelt concerns for people that have lost, for people who've helped us through. And I hope I get to mention some of those. My other confession is I don't like Zoom presentations. I would so much rather be in a room with you, but I'm not. And there's no excuse to buy a new pair of shoes, but we'll carry on. I know that many of you are or will be involved in knowledge engineering. Engineers are the magicians that bring designs to life. Now, I heard somebody say that, I stole it, and I'm really sorry that I can't name my source, which is appalling. But isn't that the most wonderful description? Now, COVID-19, we all know, has been a tipping point for transformation, digital transformation, and magicians, like all of us and all of us into the future, are very, very much in demand. During the last 2 years, some people have suffered devastating losses, truly devastating. Others appear to have come through relatively unscathed, but honestly, I don't think any of us are completely unscathed. What's important to recognise, though, is that we have definitely not been in the same boat. And we must be very, very careful of a false consensus bias that might suggest that everybody's been in my boat. Actually, I've got through it pretty well. No, that is not true. It all depends upon your age, your ethnicity, your relationships, your income and financial status, your work, and the whole of your life experiences. Now, technology has had an extraordinary impact on our lives from the moment our friend Boris said, you must stay home. Oh, I bet most of us can remember where we were when we heard that. Now, when we went into lockdown, this was my youngest friend, my grandson. He was 2 at the time. And you know what was rather wonderful, and I feel a bit guilty saying this, because he didn't go back to nursery after the first lockdown, because his parents couldn't afford it, and they were scared that he would never be able to mingle with the grandparents again in case he killed us all. He didn't go back, and we became nursery, which actually made our lives much more interesting and exciting than it should have been. For him, technology didn't make a lot of difference. This might sound a bit weird, but his mum's been very keen for him not to play computer games yet. She was very concerned about the impact on a developing brain and also the kind of self-gratification thing of it. So far, he's not been into computer games. So going into lockdown didn't mean, oh yeah, let's go on the iPad and play. It meant chatting to the grandparents. Not quite sure how that worked out. This was my eldest friend. She's fabulous. This is Dorothy. She's 90. Fortunately, she's always been very tech savvy. And for her, lockdown meant discovering Zoom. She loves it. She has seen ballets, watched shows, been to all sorts of meetings she would never have been to before, communicated via Facebook, been on all sorts of Facebook groups and messenger groups and WhatsApp groups, and actually, and done her online shopping. So fortunately for Dorothy, technology was a bit of a lifesaver. Eve was 11 when we went into lockdown. Now you'd think at school kids wouldn't be too much of a problem, learning from home, not great, but you know what? She's very social. She hated it. She hated being locked in her bedroom. And she found that although she'd been quite into social media before, she isn't now. It completely put her off. So she was very, very lonely. Yes, her school was quite good at online lessons, but there is a lesson for all of us in that. They're not necessarily the most effective way to learn. And I know that I'm very guilty of having done quite a lot of computer-based learning, that I don't seem to necessarily take it in the same way and find ways to skip through. So there was lonely Eve. They did go back to school and then they had to have days off because their social bubble got COVID or we went back into lockdown. So she found herself reluctant to re-establish friendships. And by the time it was all over, her extracurricular activities either didn't restart or she just didn't want to be involved in them. So it's quite interesting that actually a young girl was very badly impaired by lockdown, even with all the technology she had. And she also missed out on quite a few big sort of school weeks away, and those events that sometimes, you know, they're life-changing. You can do something on a trip for a week which you'd never have experienced before and go, oh my gosh, this is my career. I am going to be an Olympic champion. It's been tough. And the other thing that's quite hard is that the Office for National Statistics suggests that 3 million people don't have internet access in the UK. 2 million are elderly. 1 million either can't afford to or, interestingly, choose not to. So we're obviously going to have to look at a hybrid of people online and not online, actually forever. I know that quite a few people think, well, I'll tell you what, those 2 million elderly folk, they'll die off. Everybody will be online. We can just go for it in a big way. It's not going to happen. Of course, we're always going to have digital poverty, those who cannot afford to be online. But interestingly, there are groups who choose not to. The neo-Luddites, some religions, they all shun it completely. So we will have to continue really considering very carefully how we move forward when not everybody is moving forward in the same way. And of course, many only have access via mobile phones. If you're trying to do your homework on a mobile or fill in a pesky form on a government website, it's blooming difficult. So public access to computers and printers, well, that's going to remain essential. And for people who are always going, when we go, we need to close libraries, of course we should close libraries. And there's others going, no. Do you know, for many folk, that's their sole access to computers and maybe a printer. And are they always open when you need them? No, of course they're not. Quite a lot of clubs, Age UK have local clubs and groups that do offer computer access and training, but a lot of them haven't restarted yet after lockdown. Now, many businesses, of course, are online only, and that suits them and the way that they move forward. Many other essential services will have to continue to offer telephone and phone and postal support for these people who are not online. Systems must ensure that they are up to date with their information on compliance. Do you know, I don't know if you've noticed, but there have been a slew of articles recently about people who've been talking to the tax office, the pensions office, and they're given the wrong information. It shouldn't happen. It just shouldn't at all. We should be better at making sure all the information that we need is there and fired up and ready to go for people to use. Let me introduce you to Julie. I can't say this word properly. Julie is an esthetician and a small business owner. It means that she's fabulous with skincare. She's created an organic range of skincare products that she offers to the general public online, but particularly to beauty therapists. She wanted to be sure that they had access to really good quality, made in the UK, sustainable products. And I guess her business has been running for about 10 years. And over the last 5 before lockdown, it was really starting to gain momentum. When she heard Boris's words, it was panic time. Was the business going? How were they going to support all their therapists and all their customers? And how was she going to keep her family going too? Because not only was she and her husband involved in the business, but she's a mum, she's a daughter, she's a granny. She has all those things to juggle. And they cared very deeply for their beauty therapist clients, many of whom were quite new to business and therefore would get no financial help because they hadn't been running long enough. She knew one of the first things she needed to do was make a video to support everybody. And you know, she couldn't do it for quite a while because how could you create a video when all you want to do is cry? And she did cry for 24 hours, wondering if they were going to lose everything. And then she grit her loins, got on with it, and they moved forward. But goodness, it was hard. Not only here in this country, but her son, married in America, his father-in-law was actually the first COVID patient, so COVID-0 in California, and nearly died. They didn't expect him to live. She had 2 grandchildren who were newly born and couldn't see and was concerned for them, and mum in a care home, and who was also losing brothers and sisters, great aunts and great uncles. She was one of 7, I think, and I think 3 died over COVID. So things were not great. There was financial help in the first lockdown, and it came through very quickly and easily. Come the second lockdown, the routine for claiming had shifted from central government to local, and then things went very badly wrong. Part of the problem was that locally, information couldn't be accessed properly, and they kept being denied monies that they should have been granted, and they kept having to go back. And in the end, it turned out that the first recipient of the information working at home hadn't clicked on a really important attachment that would have meant that the information had been logged properly and everything would have been fine. So it's not been great for a lot of people trying to get online and claim what they need to survive, and they're claiming in real panic and in desperate situations. And you know what, throughout this, I've really been concerned by the reliability of the data. For example, have people died from or with COVID? We know that that's been an issue throughout, and that if you've died within 28 days of a COVID positive test, or even knowing somebody or being in close proximity, for some in care homes, it has gone down as died from COVID, which of course alters the figures spectacularly. And I know a lot of people have said their parents dying in care homes had negative tests, but still went down as died from COVID. So how reliable are the tests as well, and the stats they provide? And my bugbear, poorly constructed questionnaires and apps used to collect evidence. Now, this is a bit of that social bias thing going on. When I say poorly constructed questionnaires, I did volunteer to do one of those big questionnaire surveys that was going to ask us 3 times about our experience during COVID. And I think it was every 3 months it bobbed up. Now, it made an assumption. It made an assumption that you had anxiety and sleepless nights because of COVID and nothing else at all. I had sleepless nights because I had an arthritic hip and it was blooming painful. And I couldn't say, yeah, I don't sleep well because of that. It just made an assumption that I had anxiety. And when it got worse, because I then got locked out of the swimming pool, couldn't go and exercise, and the pain got worse, the next survey came through and I still couldn't say it's not due to COVID. In the end, I withdrew. I actually volunteered to do some COVID shifts as a volunteer at the vaccination centres, and the app that I used wasn't very good. It was very disappointing. Now, I do get that its actual main purpose was for something else, and this was obviously quickly popped on, but it was meant to offer me local sites. Most of them were 31 kilometres away, which I felt was a bit of a trek, considering that they were all around me. But my big bugbear with it was that the hours I did, it quadrupled, and it said on my form that I'd done 4 times as many hours as I had. Now, if somebody used that app, and I think it was one of the main apps being used, to look at and extrapolate volunteer hours, look how wonky they'd be. It made us all look like heroes when I only did a few shifts. So I've been very, very cautious about the information we've got. Because, of course, we know there has been a lot of deliberate misinformation, and there's been great concern about that and how you can make sure that things are fact-checked. And social media has had a responsibility for actually making things very difficult. We've got anti-vaxxers, COVID deniers, battling against those who've been working in terrible situations in the medical and care situations, or even key workers trying to make sure we all kept going. But some of the information we're being fed also a bit dubious. Tell you what, should we have some good news? A lot of folk picked up new skills. Some people's houses and gardens look better than ever. I don't know what it was, but I didn't get into the housework and the gardening. This is Avril. Avril Alton, MBE. She's 80. She's an inspirational hotelier. She owned a small hotel in the New Forest for 40 years. It was in a little niche market. It particularly catered for people who liked soft furnishings and quietness and slightly old-fashioned menus. It was a huge hit because of a lot of us like that, and we don't get them. She's a motivational speaker. She adores helping people get on. And also, she's a dancer. She was a Tiller girl in the 1970s for 10 years. She was on Sunday night at the London Palladium, every Sunday night in the Tiller Girls with her feathers and kicking her legs. And she, of course, is a great presenter and performer. She's an all-round good girl. She found some things about technology very difficult, but she did enjoy using Facebook, FaceTime and Zoom. We actually recorded some podcasts too, which, because she had got a bit anxious and depressed, were very good for her. But generally, she felt the lack of personal help when you're trying to do things, when you've got a problem, very, very difficult indeed. However, she did do a 10-week creative writing course with somebody who was obviously extremely good at it. And she's now in the middle of her book. I make no apologies for introducing you to my son, Adam. Boy, he's had a hard time. He's a musician whose gigs and production work were cancelled. So many people working in the gig economy in different ways have had no help. Their world has fallen apart. Mentally and financially for them, it's been a complete nightmare. But it has been a time to reassess and look forward to becoming a digital nomad. He is quite excited that this whole new world that we live in will give him opportunities that he never dreamt of before. This is Simon. Simon's a DJ and broadcaster. He does 3 overnight sessions for Smooth FM, who broadcast to millions of people. Now, he's a freelancer. Just before Christmas, he fell off a wall, broke his leg, did terrible things to his ankle, and then a few weeks later, he got COVID. As a freelancer, he wouldn't have been able to get into work. He would not have been paid. But because of the way things have changed and moved on, he can now broadcast from his bedroom. He couldn't make it downstairs. So he's managed to keep his job and keep all his listeners extremely happy. This is Ruby Jones. She has terrible hypermobility problems to the worst degree, and is a disabled activist who, before the pandemic, really struggled to work. She's the creator of My Accessible Pandemic. And what she found was, if you could work from home at any time of the night or day, so you could make allowances for the fact that you might have to disappear to bed in pain for an hour or so, you could have a job you couldn't have had before. Now, she recognises it doesn't suit every disabled people, but for a lot of people, there has been a renaissance. All these scenarios have different implications for our tech development. One thing that's very obvious is people's situations are more complex than many systems allow for. You know those drop-down lists and you've got to find your little category and it's just not there, or whatever it is that you're up to, and you can't seem to find it and you can't get help, and there might be help, but it only reinforces what's on the screen already, and a little bot might come and offer you help, but it's only going to give you the same help, and you're actually just going around in circles, going completely bonkers. We've also found that systems belonging to our big bureaucratic institutions really can't be easily adapted to current needs. I was listening to some people talking about applying to allow Ukraine refugees into their home, and we know the problems that have been with that, and heard the wonderful comment, I can track my Amazon parcel from China, but I can't track my application that's sitting in a pile somewhere in the UK. And without that particular sort of back end, so many of our systems really aren't fit for purpose. If you think of the DVLA and the Passport Office, if only we could go online and see where we are, we wouldn't need to make 1 million phone calls that actually can't be answered at the moment. We'd be able to see things. And of course, those sorts of systems, because we still need those postal applications coming in and going out, also mean that not everybody can work from home. I did notice another problem. There's the issue of computer literacy and language literacy. On one of those COVID shifts as a steward, I was reminded how many folk can't read. Do you know, we actually have quite a poor rate of literacy in this country. So when we say to people, now you've got to have a vaccination, you've got to go online, can't go online, Mum might be able to do it for me, book me up. I arrive, some funny lady sat there with a little busy bestie thing on, ask me what time my appointment is, and I don't know. Have I filled in my form? Well, no, I haven't, because I don't know how to. It was very, very difficult and embarrassing for them. So when designing websites and forms, we really need to consider that reading age and computer literacy, and of course, the languages that are coming to us. But if you're writing in English, there is a fantastic website, readable.com, and you just upload your text and it will analyze it in terms of reading age. I think The Guardian works on a reading age of 14. Most of us in this country have a reading age of 9. So you do need to think about this. And Microsoft Word also, if you poke about in your settings, you will find that there is a button that will tell you the reading age of the documents that you are working on. Do you know it's going to take quite some time to assess the implications for every age group, every social group, and the necessary outcomes and the interactions? It is our responsibility, us designing all this stuff that's driving people nuts, to make sure that we create systems that really are fit for purpose, that are simple to understand, that give both the user and both the front end user and the back end user everything they need, that they are robust. Now, it's possible that unless you live in Manchester, you're unaware that the Greater Manchester Health Authority systems went down completely for, I think, about 2 weeks, and caused complete and utter devastation. I think they're back on now. This is only recent, but it meant that people didn't know who was come to clinics. There was no availability of notes. If you've been to hospital recently, you'll know that you give in a little barcode, and when you're having all your obs taken, it all goes into a reader with your barcode. None of that was available. Can you imagine the devastating outcome and the panic within the systems and the people working in it? It's not good enough. They need to be compatible. Now, I did see many years ago when I was involved in, well, actually at this point I was watching the setup of computer systems in a big educational establishment, a higher educational establishment. It was the time that we were moving from mainframe computing and things like WordPerfect to graphic user interfaces like Windows. And that was kind of driven by users. They're going, I can't understand Word perfect, but give me something in Windows and I can just click a button and I can do it. We want it, which drove, of course, the IT managers nuts because their old systems were actually on fax computers, very reliable. And this did change things. Things collapsed greatly. But something else happened. Departments were told that they could go off and they could buy their own systems within the educational system itself. So they all bought things that didn't talk to each other. You had registration not talking to admissions and admissions not talking to the different departments. And what we've seen is that continued. So for a lot of the jobs being done at the moment, where perhaps in Whitehall, different offices have picked up different responsibilities, they're finding that actually they can't share the information and they can't get into it. And how it's just ridiculous. I'm sorry, but it is. Talking to people generally, what did I find concerns us? People are saying, well, I don't think our manager fully understands the implication of IT strategies and systems. There's a lovely saying that if you have a group of people in a meeting deciding budgets, they will battle for hours about the little ones, the biscuits for the meetings, because they understand it. But give them a multi-million-pound budget and computer systems, they'll sign well anything off, which might be great for you, depending on your position, because actually they don't truly understand. A lot of people are concerned that social support isn't going to revert to its post-pandemic levels. So those clubs offering computer access, or even the sort of support where you might go into a shop. I know, I had to buy a new iPad, silly thing, it got out of date. And I thought, I'll take myself down to the Apple shop because I know it's easy to install on a new one, but wouldn't it be nice if somebody did it for me? Not thinking that, of course, at that point, I don't know if it's changed, they couldn't touch it. So they couldn't take it out of the box and update the new one for me. And it's those little things that I think people are very worried that they will never come back. So yes, we've lost personal service in very many ways. And you know what? I think we've lost spontaneity. Those days when you used to think, my favorite day is the day when you don't know what's going to happen and you get up and you do something amazing. But now, if you haven't booked it yesterday, then you're a bit stuffed. So many of our attractions now say you have to book online, preferably the day before. Sometimes you can do it on the day, but then you're piddling about with your little mobile phone trying to work out how you can do it, and you haven't got a signal. So I do think it has changed the way we live. And a big factor for a lot of people is the way that wealth is now being redistributed. When we first went into lockdown and people started buying takeaways madly, the little local takeaway was thrilled. Who wouldn't be? And a lot of restaurants went, yay, we'll offer takeaways. And then the big boys thought, oh yeah, we'll do that. And of course, to them, most of the orders go to the big boys. And that little takeaway around the corner got shut down. We're not going to our little local shops, and I try so hard to buy from them if I'm buying online, but even that gets difficult. It's expensive for them to have really good websites. There are collaborative websites for villages and things, but you've still got to think, oh, I wonder what's for sale in Hepton Bridge. It's a brilliant place to walk around, lots of artisans and creative people, and then sort of poke about. It takes a lot of extra effort. And then, of course, we've got the fact that these big tech companies are taking the wealth from local tax systems, and that too is being redistributed. And do you know what else? A lot of people said to me, I'm a bit worried that influencers are going to dominate aspirations. Lovely Holly H, I think, who has the highest number of followers certainly in the UK. She's lovely. She's a young woman, does makeup and stuff. But I don't know how many people follow Margaret Ross, who to me is much more inspirational and aspirational. And there are also concerns. People say to me, what about the electricity due? We're not using much, are we? Well, yeah, we all know that we are. The feeling is, Bloomberg, I saw recently did a thing saying that by the end of this decade, 8% of electricity in the UK will be used for cloud computing. Now it's quite a big number for something that we don't think takes anything at all. What do we need? For me, it's the 3 E's. This one's becoming slightly overworked. We need empathy. If all you've got to do is battle with this blooming online system that doesn't seem to care for you in any way whatsoever, we need to find a way to make it. And one of the big ways that it's happening, I know, is in AI, and a lot of very expensive systems will include things to make us feel more cherished. You can notice it if you watch adverts at the moment. Excuse me. Suddenly things are going from, oh, aren't we big and wonderful, to we do love you and we do care about you. And then you go online and you think, no, you do not. I thought I'd flog off some stuff recently, and I went onto eBay and stupidly used a name slightly different to the name on my bank account. And it took me weeks to realize. And I kept going round in circles of why hadn't they been able to do it? And the little bot told me what the help told me. And if I rang them up, that's what they told me. And then in desperation one day, I did ring again and spoke to a lovely young man who actually said, I'm not going to tell you to try and redo this because I suspect you've done it 20 times or more, probably more like 50. Yes, I will find out and ring you back. I felt very cared for, except he never rang back. So please, can we have efficiency? Please, can people stop saying, this is important to us. Please, can you stop saying, thank you for your call. You're very important to us when we get through to a call service, if we do. And can we just have efficiency in all the systems? And ease of use. Please make it simple, not just for your highly literate friends, but for absolutely all of us. So I really hope that the whole point for me of today is just making you question slightly and ponder and react to the human condition and help build a really great new future, because we are on the cusp of something quite special. And we all need to use our magic, every single one of us. So thank you for listening to the old computer geeky batty person.
Right, well, most of you, I think, know Larry, but just to give him a bit of an introduction, the paper is entitled Assessing the Impact of Innovative Borderless Hybrid Education for Practitioners in Emerging Economies. Back to the emerging economies theme again. And Larry is presenting, I think, from the University of Sunderland.
Correct, that's right, yes.
Over to you, Larry, if you'd like to share your screen when you're ready.
Okay, thank you. I should do that. Okay, good morning, everyone, and welcome to my presentation. I'm so delighted that I'm welcome to this forum to share with you how things have been over the last 18 months for me as a person, and also what I can learn and share with the audience, and what I can implement in developing country. So as you heard, the title is Assessing the Potential of Innovative Hybrid Education for Practitioners in Emerging Economy. You might probably say, hey, Larry, this is dated. Well, in this part of the world, hybrid education is becoming the norm, even though it's very, very new. It's a new way of teaching, but it's becoming the norm. But in developing economy, some part of it is still a no-go area. So the idea for me is to share with you the experience of the last 18 months as an academic using hybrid method to educate people in the UK, and I've basically made an inroad into some universities in developing country to see how I can implement this for them. So I'm also going to discuss the digital transformation journey of one of the UK universities, that's where I work, and how this have shaped the implementation, or how this could change or basically shape the implementation of emerging economies, where I believe this will be very, very impactful. I will discuss the impact on students and staff and how the experience can benefit higher education in the emerging economy. Because I remember what happened to us when we have a lockdown. Suddenly, all of us become expert overnight, all of a sudden. But this wasn't the case for some countries in developing countries. So a bit of myself, as already been mentioned by the chairman, I currently teach undergraduate and postgraduate programs at the University of Sunderland, including business and public health. I was the previous CEO and Director of Studies at the London Academy Business School. I was a visiting professor at Tbilisi University in Georgia. I'm currently a member of the Strategic Operation Group for TEF 2022, shared by the PVC, Learning and Teaching at the University of Sunderland in London, and also a fellow, of course, gladly to be a fellow of the British Computer Society and other professional bodies as well, including Chartered Institute of Marketing. Also, Microsoft Certified IT Trainer, MCT. My specialism is actually in knowledge management, strategic management, project management, and higher education management. And before academics, I worked for the police headquarters as a system analyst. And also happy to mention that I commissioned the fastest operating theater here in England at Central Medicine Hospital. That's where I met Tony Blair. And recently I've published a few books, journals, and that's the title of the current book I've actually contributed a chapter and currently releasing another book as we speak. So, ladies and gentlemen, the potential of hybrid education, just an overview. This has been mentioned times and times again on this in this conference, and I wouldn't want to bore you too much on that, but just to mention a few things. COVID-19 has created challenges and caused disruption across the higher education institution, no doubt about that. But in itself, it has been also an opportunity to open new avenues to how we can develop ourselves. Face-to-face teaching assessment all shifted online, but that is only some part of the UK. But how about developing countries? They struggle. Actually, it was more or less a standstill. Student becomes idle for months and some into years before they were able to get back on track. So most university ambition in the UK is to extend and enhance digital education both within the UK and overseas for those who have overseas campuses, to make sure this is actually happening, to enable more research and also teaching to take place. So we will say, generally, the aim of education is to transform digital education provisions to better meet the expectations of students, academics, and also professional services. According to Standardize, with other member of his team, 2021, he says some common problems and experience in hybrid learning included unstable internet connectivity, which we on this platform have also experienced. We have had one yesterday, and also I'm sure it's happening today as well. So this has been a problem of online learning, but how can this be overcome? Inadequate computers in some places where we have IT, computer science students in the classroom, but actually staying behind the queue to watch 1 or 2, 3 students actually having physical access to those computers. So in this part of the world, it might be something of the past where people have access to literally every student have access to computers. Unfortunately, that's not the case in developing economy, where few people will have access to it, others will just watch on, never had to practice or even use it themselves, or not even able to buy one for themselves. So all of that are issues that are actually facing those countries. But my aim with this paper is to see how we can see how to help and provide some kind of solutions. So before we do that, I need to kind of make a case. From the abstract of this paper, the need for digital transformation is actually essential. That is to have a future proofing of university in emerging economies, to see that we have future-proof universities where technology can be and put in place to help meet student expectations. Unfortunately, in an environment where computers are gold mine to some, and some unable to afford to buy one, if you don't have one in school, probably don't have one at home. The only thing they have is their phone. So how can you be effective if you're teaching online or providing hybrid? So mainly then, hybrid would be a very, very good solution to help people, to help students gain education that they actually have paid for, and making sure they receive it at the right speed, the right rate, because they have what it takes to actually log on to university campuses and actually have the right information that they need. So effective and efficient working practices is essential. And how do you manage huge data in this environment where there's connectivity issues, people are not able to log on? So few students will have access to the information that they are required to have. And so therefore, if you don't have, you can't give what you don't have. If you baggage in, you garbage out. So if you don't have the right information from all the students, so what you get is just few number of students providing the right information that you need. So we need to also be able to enable research and innovation. These are all that can be done. How can we do that? Is to have a modernized estate and also create facility management that allow all this to happen. And that is some of my recommendations in the book. So what do we mean? What do we have to do? We need to create a digital ecosystem. So we have business model that take students, because these days I no longer regard student as just student. They are our client, they're customers, they're paying for services. Back in the days, we think students are just students. We have total right over what we do, of course, but actually they are the one paying our bills, paying our salary. So they are our clients. How do we treat our students like customers? And that will mean we need to pay more attention to how we provide services to them. So value proposition to making sure what they pay for is what they're getting. And that will also be relevant or become more visible if we provide that with our financial model. And our operating model should include resources, making sure we have a digital estate that have all the technology that is needed to provide hybrid education to our students. And of course, I mentioned earlier on, value streams. Are they getting what they paid for? Are students being able to receive what they bargained for from the beginning to the end? That's very important. And also that will depend heavily on governance. As we know, interference of government in universities overseas in developing countries is a serious issue. Universities they're not autonomous as they are in this country. And that is one of the things that governance issues need to take into account. And holding all this together will mean we can create a digital system, a digital environment that cater for the student. But having the capability is very important. That is, are the staff trained? Do they have the skills needed to be able to put all this to bear? Very, very key. So just to give you an example, during the pandemic, we have a cyber attack, and that impacted heavily on students, left staff, students unable to access their emails. Remote learning system became not even available. Telephone lines were cut off. All of that makes it very impossible. This is happening in an environment where systems are in place. You can imagine what will happen in an environment where those things are not currently in place. So there's a huge need, if we are to embark on hybrid learning, to put in place things that will secure our environment from cyber attack. The Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, OECD, said that remaining only online will mark a failure by universities to offer value for money to students and risk them being overtaken by more competitive digital providers who can provide hybrid education, both face-to-face and online at the same time, and able to have the resources that they need. As you can see, some emerging countries are experiencing more migrations of students to more advanced countries as a result of lack of these issues. So there's a huge need for this to happen in developing economy. So let's look at the range of digital educational activities that has taken place in the past 18 months. Most universities strengthen their online provisions by making sure they have digital skills for all, not only for students, but also for staff, and encouraging them, making it attractive to them by creating micro-credentials, making sure that it's not just you sitting on the computer. At the end of the day, you get a certificate to show you've attended this program. You're now, for example, Achieve Champion or expert, or you basically have gained some kind of qualification to show the time you spent in front of the computer, reading or listening to lectures. I really like this. So digital inclusion is very key, not just for the able people, but also the disabled and those who need help in understanding that because of their age. In my current university, we have at least 30% of our students are 40, 50 plus. So those people are not brought up in the age of computers. How do we help them to become more computer literate and become active in using computer? So we need to have digital inclusion. And we can do that if we try to see how we can create a digital estate and create a smart campus. And that will help us to do some of those things. And those are part of my recommendation in the paper that I'm writing that I can use in developing countries. For example, again, Sunderland University, part of the university commitment to enable access to higher education for all include a hybrid provision. So they partner with higher education partners to help them recruit people for online and also face-to-face and see how both of them could be joined together. Just to put that in perspective, in Nigeria, for example, right now, if 2 million people apply for university places, 2 million people, only around about 300,000 to 400,000 get a place. So we're looking at 1.6 million people on the street without university places. That is really a heartbreaking story. And that is why you see many of the Nigerian students or other African students going to less endowed country to seek qualification. And many are coming to Europe and to US and to Australia, Canada, and so forth. So I believe if this provision could be made available, that will probably reduce that migration exodus. And because during the pandemic, they couldn't go anywhere. So literally they lose out. And if this is not a wake-up call to everyone, it is, because the populations of developing countries is improving every single time. And that in itself will create a bottleneck if care is not taken. So developing an online module has enhanced academic skills. That could also be things that we could share with developing countries. Supporting and teaching online has had an impact on campus-based provision, no doubt about that, because it helps people to communicate well and relate with each other and share experiences with each other. But is that the same thing in developing country? Not really. So there's a need to improve, to help improve on that. So what do I mean by digital skills for all? Basically, what we've done in the last 18 months, we create what we call Flying Start. During the induction, we help our students to know how to use all our VLE platforms, especially the Teams, Canvas, 365, and so forth. That was part of their induction. And we created also extracurricular activities, also help them to see that they can become more educated when it comes to computing. And I'm happy to see that we're part of BCS to see how we can partner with BCS and run programs that it can benefit from as well. So digital skill for staff is quite essential. We've made it very clear. There's a baseline expectation for all our staff. They need to be at least ECDL qualified to be able to practice and do what they do. But that is easy to say in this part of the world. In developing countries, many are not currently using PowerPoint. They're still using chalks and Blackboard. And how can that help students in this day and age? So we need to create an opportunity to help them see how they can become better in IT. And that will depend on helping them to understand what pedagogy is, instructional design, and hybrid learning, training them to understand those things, and developing the learning communities among all our lecturers back in those countries. And of course, we have to be consistent with this because there is huge data. Data is improving every 18 months. So cloud, using different dashboards to collect data and analyze them and store them in cloud is very, very key. So all of these are things that we need to be able to share with developing country. How about augmented reality or virtual reality as well, where people need to understand how we get involved in that, all of that. AI is becoming things of today, not of tomorrow, but how many people actually are aware of it. So to have a smart campus, all our lecturers need to be aware of the importance of all these technologies and also helping the developing country to see the need for that is my major aim in writing that. This is just a synopsis of what I've been talking about. Digital skills for all staff, making sure everyone know what is expected of them. The students are also given that opportunity. So how do we create a digital estate? Well, that's what we call classroom of the future. We need to prepare and develop a pilot room that we can use to showcase what we are talking about, developing different proposals, making a case for it, and also thinking of the time scale to achieve that. Now, how about the money that we use? I mean, the African Development Bank can make a lot of money available to these universities, and some of them need to develop how to make money themselves and developing teaching labs that have all the relevant IT resources and sharing with colleagues that have skills that they don't have. Being able to interact with your colleagues who have better IT skills than yourself is very important. And how about thinking in developing countries where they're a bit behind at this point in time, having iPad for students to learn, or creating social network that they can log into, or even donating a laptop for the year one students to get them at least have a good start. All these are a huge endeavor, but I believe it can be achieved if we put our heart to it. Well, here is a sample, prototype, classroom of the future, what it should look like. And here our presentation screen, and you have a confidence monitor that shows how it looks like when you actually present it. And you have students actually logging in from different parts of the country. For example, I'm using Nigeria as a case study, 36 states in one country, 36 states. The majority of them should be able to join a hybrid education from each state they are, but while they're doing lecture online, they should be able to have something like this, having a static room set up, to, more or less like having a physical room. But this is expensive, but it can be achieved. Of course, that is knowing how it works, because as I mentioned, you cannot give what you don't have. And it takes a small group of individuals to make things happen. Here is how it looks like from our perspective in Sunderland, where we have this room as hybrid environment where you can have people logging in and also have people sitting down and also enjoying it, as you can see on both. So this is something I have included in my presentation that I'll be sharing at the end of the day.
Larry, you have about 10 minutes.
Okay, yeah, I'm very close. So micro credentials is one of those things that I recommend that make sure that staff know they have something that they will gain at the end of the training. Very, very important. The full consultation with stakeholders across the university community is very key to get extra partners in to help them know how they can provide these kind of services to their staff. Smart campus, as mentioned earlier on, is a very, very important thing to do. That is potential to contribute to a sustainable agenda of hybrid learning. So creating a smart campus is very important. Work with funding partners if money is an issue to make sure that can be created. I suggest African Development Bank can do more than what they're doing. Speaking smart campus idea is a good thing, but people need to know what is involved. So campus outdoor Wi-Fi coverage around the area is very, very key. And the ability to link with Eduroam or via Eduroam into the university public Wi-Fi system is very key. In Nigeria, for example, Econet is what they use, but it's a bit expensive, but they can make it happen. So work with organization on proof of concept project for a smart campus to see that it's viable, make a case for it, and that could happen, and they can achieve that if they do that. So data inclusion, as mentioned, is very, very important. That's what we call addressing digital poverty. Equipment, infrastructures, environmental, and skills are still something to think about. The use of technology can underpin mental health and well-being. That is, understanding that is, in some instances, technological solutions can contribute to mental health and well-being. So if you're using a computer that's very, very slow, that will in itself make you very, very mad. I also mentioned that ensuring a baseline for digital literacy for all lecturers is a key thing to remember. So, potential digital education activities is what I think is important. I've mentioned that everything here is a list of recommendations that I think is important. Consideration of digital for students and for staff, and also creating a forum where we can learn things together, very, very key. And my final recommendation would be embedding digital skills in all our courses. So that from beginning, from induction, students know how to use the VLE, Canvas, 365. They get used to it. Upgrading digital teaching facilities to help lecturers know how to use Smartboard and how to operate hybrid system from wherever they are. Shaping pedagogy to embrace educational technology. Developing of micro-credentials and digital badges is also key. Setting digital skills baseline for academic staff, as I can't say that enough, is very, very key. You need to attract, you need to engage them, make it attractive to them. That's important. So in conclusion, this research and experimentation help determine how hybrid learning transform teachers and the teaching occupation within higher education, as many faculties remain uncertain about online teaching and suggest ways to address these challenges in some emerging economy. And the list I put on here is examine prominent delivery models of higher education in the respective countries or regions that there are from the perspective of their socioeconomic, demographic, political, and workforce competitiveness, with special attention to education effectiveness and policies. Also examine public education funding models from the vantage point of access, affordability, and desirable outcome from higher education. Very, very key. Not everyone can afford to go to higher education. So I think it's important that is taken into account. So comment upon elements of business, education, and funding models that appear to work, and others with room for improvement. Access exemplars of businesses and higher education models, and comment upon their potential and portability, and articulate the case for reform choices available to policymakers and educational leaders. I see in some cases, many are spending money on security, not on education. And education is the future of every organization. So in summary, ladies and gentlemen, digital transformation is key for academic work, employment, and for our lives. Higher education needs to embrace and commit to digital strategy, ensure that there is a training and support to enable development of digital environment in our organization. And here is a draft that I put together that basically I will share with this organization or countries that I visit to help them develop hybrid education as the need. Thank you very much.
Last paper in this session, the security awareness silver lining of the COVID home working cloud. More positives, I hope, then. Wendy from Goucher Consulting Limited, UK.
Yeah. Well, good morning, everyone. I'm a bit of a break, I think, from your discussion around education, which I found absolutely fascinating over the last couple of days, I have to say. So I'm coming to look at things slightly differently. I generally work as a cyber risk and behavior consultant, and for the last 5 years or so, I've worked in various bits of UK and Scottish government. So, and haven't been in education, teaching in education for about 11 years. So yeah, I've got a very different view of things. So I hope this is something that's going to take us forward in a very positive way towards lunch. The background to this is that in the autumn of 2020, so just coming out of the first lockdown in the UK and in Scotland anyway, a literary agent approached me and said, if you could write anything about anything, I have written a few books, what would you write? And I said, I want to take something positive out of COVID. There must be something positive from security that we can take forward. So I spent a year working on that. I didn't have the academic text to look at, but businesses, especially big organizations at the beginning, had published reports and blogs and things like that. So that's mostly what I've looked at, but I'm hopeful that what I'm going to do for you in the next 20 minutes or so is just give you a flavor of what I'm doing, or what I did rather. Let me just get myself into the right. There we go. I was an academic once, I can do outlines. So this is where we're going. So you kind of can plan, oh, when she gets to that bit, I'm very close to my lunch, which is always good. So we'll just crack on. Hopefully it will just flow for us. So at the time of the start of the pandemic, I was working for the Scottish Government in Scottish Census 2021, which ended up being 2022, in Edinburgh. This is Edinburgh. This is the Castle Esplanade up high up on the hill. You can tell that these people standing there are mostly tourists. You can tell that because they have umbrellas. In Scotland, especially when you get up on the Esplanade, the rain is horizontal, and umbrellas are just there to make tourists look idiots, because they're no use to at all, except if you get the really, really rounded ones. But this is the sort of thing you will see, or would see, any day of the week. This is a walk, again in Edinburgh. This is people going up to the Edinburgh Military Tattoo, which is on in August every year, is on that Esplanade. And yes, these are all people walking forward. They're all generally funneling into that road on the right with the red banners on it. So, and this follows on, sort of overlaps the end of the Edinburgh Festival. So it becomes a crazy place to be. I was born in this city, but I've really not lived in it since I was very, very young. But my son was in university here at the time of the start of the pandemic. So this is what Edinburgh usually looks like. About 2 years ago, almost exactly, my son decided he needed to go out for a walk for his own mental health, and he wandered around and took lots of pictures. This is the Esplanade again. There are, as you can see, 1 or 2 people there. You were allowed to sort of vaguely wander around, and as long as you didn't get too close. So as you can see, it's a very different environment. Earlier in the morning, this is just, if you turned 180 degrees from the people going to the tattoo picture, this is what you'd see looking south. This is St. Giles Cathedral. I particularly love this picture because in my head, history is a hobby of mine. In my head, this picture could be any time at all in the last 200 years, except for the people dressed that you can just about see in the bottom left corner. So the world stopped. I went home from work on the 31st of March 2020, and as I was somebody that was identified as being clinically vulnerable, I was told to clear my desk, and I'd probably be away for about 6 weeks or so. As I was a contractor, I didn't know how that was going to knock onto my contract, so therefore I took everything with me. Other people didn't, because they didn't expect it. Within a week, my husband was also isolated because of not passing anything on to me. And then we were pretty much all locked in after that. So of course there were lots and lots of challenges, and we know these, but these are the challenges that hit us in both government, in my perspective, and in business in general. First of all, there was IT kit for all. People like me who walk around with laptops for everywhere you contract to. It can almost seem weird that you need the IT was running around, but they really, really were. All across the world, people were trying to get laptops and tablets, and that was a real problem and continues to be a problem with semiconductors and so on and so forth. Linked to that also is trying to find a place to sit. She looks lovely and smiley and comfy, but I bet if she sat there all day, she would have a sore neck and probably dead feet, because people were trying to find somewhere that they could sit. Very often it was a kitchen. Now, in the early days, certainly in Scotland, the bandwidth was very restricted. So there were very few actual video meetings, because if 2 or 3 people turned their videos on, the whole thing fell into a big hole. So we didn't see that much of people, but you could hear the noise that was moving around, and it was a real challenge. Secure communication, people were just thinking about how do we connect, and if we don't get this IT kit out to people, are they going to use their own devices or computers, which obviously was an option, and that has other concerns, and we'll come back to those in a moment. Video meetings, we had to get used to video meetings eventually as they started to open up, and that also had a security option. This delightful gentleman, his name is Pete Woods. He is one of the older, I think he would not mind me saying, one of the fathers of InfoSec security engineering in the UK. He's a wonderful, wonderful man. And he gave me permission to use this picture because I pointed out that if people didn't have a background, I have a background. The reason that I've got a flat head is because of my light. It's not because I have a flat head. But he has his normal background. And of course, one of the ways you could socially engineer people was you could look at things and say, ah, yes, Pete's into guitars, older guitars. Maybe if I try his password as Fender 123 or something like that, that may be an easy way to guess. We may be facilitating that. So it was it was something that occurred to me during a very boring meeting, or maybe several, that we were giving away information that we perhaps shouldn't, and that was a challenge as well. And many people were challenged by dogs and cats and elderly relatives and young children, and the amount of times people are going, I'm really sorry, the dog is really loud, and you're sort of going, I actually can't hear your dog. Please just calm down. It's okay. People got very, very stressed about all the environment they were in, and we did get to see some very cute dogs. Management also was a challenge. How do you move from being able to see the staff that you're responsible for in the corridor and just know by the way they're walking, know by the way they're standing, the way they're dressing, how they are, or if there is something you should be concerned about. All those cues that we don't necessarily even think about disappeared. They were not available to us on video. There were all the jokes of people wearing sort of nice shirts and their pajamas and fluffy socks and things. But in the days when we couldn't even see people, it was worse than that. We literally couldn't see, and managers had a very difficult time managing. So let's specifically drop into the security awareness challenges for now. And first of all, we've got, what are the risks? I made the comment about Pete's background. There was some discussion as to whether that was a real risk, whether it was a real problem, whether anybody would actually try and do anything with that. And there were all these sorts of discussions about what is the risk. Later in the process, some organizations said, oh, people are printing off documents on their home printers because they like to have things printed off if they're going to draw on them, for example. What are we going to do about that? Do these printers have an internal chip? Which is only really a problem if you're dealing with sensitive information. But of course we were with census, not with people's information necessarily, but with information regarding how data was going to be secured during the census and afterwards. So you had that sort of concern, and we're trying to identify where we need to help people and we need to guide people. And then we have to think about communication. And again, we're used to being in an office environment, which gave us a number of benefits. You could put up posters, you could hand out mouse mats, you could have a 5-minute drop into a meeting and just say, hey guys, here is this piece of information we'd like you to know. Please be aware of this. And it was easy to stick. Now we had to stop and say, how do we communicate? How do we get information across in a clear way, in a virtual way? And that is not necessarily the same way that you get information across when you're in a one-to-one situation. There were also concerns about secure communication. In pre-COVID, some organizations said people could not, had to have a dongle or some such thing because they didn't want people using their own Wi-Fi. And that became more of a problem during a long spell of being away from work, because in the end, Wi-Fi was the fastest way of doing these things. How do people secure their routers? Do they even know where their router is or how to secure it, for example? Do they have their Wi-Fi password protected? Or do we just, this is just so technical, is there an easy solution for it that a non-technical person would understand without you being patronizing? Then it was just, in many cases, it was, let's just leave it be, because the solution to this is way more of a problem than the actual risk. Cognitive bandwidth. Now, this is something I came across in my MSc research, because I researched into shoulder surfing and working in public places. And this was about the way that people could sit and work away on a train or be on a phone on the train and be talking about all sorts of things that they really shouldn't be talking about in front of non-authorized people, and simply not be aware because they're very focused on what they're doing. When I'm talking about COVID working, cognitive bandwidth is about, are they being distracted? Can they concentrate? Are they, for example, because they're distracted, sending an email to the wrong J. Smith? Easy to do at the best of times, even worse if you've got problematic situations. And again, management, how do we do that? There was a talk I dropped into yesterday about lecturing online, and I made the comment that my son was working as a personal assistant to a blind student in Scotland over COVID, and one or two of the lecturers insisted that everybody had their camera turned on, and that included him, even though he wasn't a student. It also included the person he was working for, who is profoundly blind, has never been able to see, so had no idea whether they were looking ahead, face, whether a hair was straight. It was for me, it was a gross invasion of privacy and extremely disrespectful. But the lecturer felt that if they didn't see everybody, including people that were not their students, then they couldn't properly lecture. But this was all getting used to these things. It was difficult. We should not forget this. But let's go to the silver lining, because all the way through, I'm going, we have to be able to learn some good stuff out of this. And I hope that we have. Communication had to be upgraded. As I said before, I'm a risk consultant and operational behavioral security. So I've always been interested in communication, because I write as well as I used to teach. Communication is an absolutely core to everything that I do. I have to be able to communicate at the right level. I write cybersecurity books for 5-year-olds using story, by the way. And that is a very different way of, you have to think about what your message is, how you do that in order to raise children to be a little bit more cynical about what's happening online. Is that person really who they are pretending to be, for example? So communications had to be upgraded. Thankfully, in many situations, this meant that people who were in the communications team and were kind of shoved on the edge, these are the people we send our articles to when we want them on the internet. These people with a huge range of skills suddenly will be becoming involved in good communication for security awareness. And this has reaped bonuses I have seen in many, many situations. The communication around security awareness, whether that's actual training or just planting of messages, then that has improved immensely, because we're using the skills of people in an appropriate way. And again, about targeting. If you're back to the Wi-Fi discussion, yes, if you've got tech staff, you can say to them, can you go check your home router, for example, or your home Wi-Fi? If you came and told me, I would go and fetch my husband to do it. If I was in the house on my own, you've got no chance. I'm not going to start playing with that, because I would do all sorts of damage, I'm sure, turn the wrong things off and on. So you have to target particular messages in particular ways. And relevance as well is important. For a long time, I've said that people are essentially selfish. In order for a message to land, you have to make it meaningful to the person that's landing, and they care more about themselves and the people they love than the organization they work for. Some organizations think that that's something that is regrettable and shouldn't be, but I'm sorry, that's human. So if you show and encourage people to protect those around them, then they are more mindful. For example, how do they dispose of the paper that they've been printing? Let's give you some ideas of how you're going to do that. Because if you've got a very cheap shredder, for example, that may not be sufficient. The strips are too wide, it's not really secure. And if you're dealing with sensitive personal data, like a HR department, then you've just got to give people more help. And once they've done that, they're going, oh, when I've got to get rid of my financial documents, I'm going to do what they've told me to for work. So we've had to do that more. And that's a really good thing, because I know that's more important. Mental health awareness, as again, I've heard in many talks over the last couple of days, this guy's stressed out in traffic. That is one thing I will never miss, is the hour in and hour out I spent every day in the commuter traffic going into Edinburgh. No way I'm going to miss that. But we had other health awareness issues, mental health awareness, but we're talking about it. My 86-year-old dad and I had a discussion around depression that we had never had before, because it was simply something that people didn't talk about. Once we started talking about it, he was going, oh yeah, no, people in my family suffered in this way, people that I, his granddad and whatever. And this is becoming something that we're looking at, something that we are being aware of. We've still got to move from talking a lot of talk to doing it. I lovely situation. I'm not working for the Scottish Government now. I'm working for a part of the UK government. I'm working in the UK Health Security Agency at the moment. And my boss turned round to, or my boss's boss turned round to the group of people on Friday at our all hands meeting and said, right, guys, I don't want to see any of you online over the weekend unless you're specifically rostered on. And then it was sort of, well, how would, and I sort of put in the chat to him and I said, Mike, how will you know unless you're online? And he went, yeah, I always work at the weekend. And I'm going, maybe you want to go away and think about that. I suspect he still worked at the weekend, but that's his choice. So where am I going forward? What do we need to think of? Well, first of all, I'm delighted to say that we can see security awareness as more holistic. I talked about the children's book I had. One of my friends who has his own business, when his employees have children that are growing up and getting towards school, he gives them the books that I've written as part of their security awareness education. And he says, take these away, sit down. The idea is that you talk to your children with these things. And if they sit down and talk about cybersecurity with their children, it's becoming part of what we talk about, just like crossing the road. It becomes a normal part of the dialogue, and therefore something that you can develop behaviors around. Likewise, with older people, it's amazing. My dad's biggest freak out, I think, he's way down in England, about 400 miles away from me, and I'm an only child. So his biggest stress out was that the men's group that he's part of, he had a committee meeting coming up, and somehow when he was hoovering his office, he had managed to unplug his camera. And this was at a point where you could just about have one person who was in your bubble, as they called it. It was in your restricted group, extended group, come into your house. And he was saying, I can't plug it back in, and I won't be able to get onto Zoom, and I won't be able to see my friends. And I called a friend of mine who I knew who didn't have who lives alone. And he was able to go in all masked up, climb underneath my dad's desk and plug the camera in. Now, to any time before, my dad would have said, oh, I'm not having anything to do with Zoom. And I have heard that said in other discussions today and yesterday, how people who didn't regard themselves as being online people or tech savvy or really very interested in video have become so. And that is a beautiful thing when it gives joy, when it gives when it makes people feel better. Skilled communicators are making a difference. They are being allowed to make a difference. They're being allowed to do something other than just writing articles to go on the internet. They're being consulted slowly, let's not overstate this, but slowly but surely people are going, maybe people in the communications department, even people in marketing, may know how to sell a message of security. Wow, there's an amazing and revolutionary idea. Strangely, though I mock it, I've actually found that in some organizations that I've worked with, they're sort of going, oh, I had never thought. I thought they were just selling our product. I'm going, yeah, they are, but they have huge skills. And these people are now being allowed to use those skills in a helpful way. So not only is security awareness becoming something that covers the whole family, is, I won't say 365 because that's Microsoft, but it's your whole 360 around your life. It's something that you're thinking about in terms of people, but also in terms of how do I communicate my ideas. And also we're talking about new ways of managing people. As I said before, that you're not getting the sort of cues you used to get. I had to listen to I had to drop out for a short while this morning and listen to a mandatory training video this morning, and for the UK HSA, what they were saying was you have to make sure that you have a one-to-one meeting with your boss at least once a month, and go get a cup of tea, sit down, have a biscuit, have a cup of tea, try and get that relaxed atmosphere going in order that you just learn to communicate in a way that you would do if your boss had just said, come on, let's go and get a coffee and chat about your month. I have worked in 3 government departments since the start of COVID, and I haven't been onto the site of any of them. And I haven't, in 2 out of the 3, I haven't met anybody I worked with firsthand. So it's a new world. So we have to learn to make a difference. I tend to arrive at a meeting 5 minutes before. When I get the default, the video platform we use, UK HSA, is Teams, and that gives me a 5-minute, that or Outlook gives me a 5-minute warning when the meeting's going to start. If I'm not in another meeting, I will often drop in early, because you can have a good chat with people before the meeting starts. It's just like getting in the room early, and I try to do that, and I enjoy it, because people who like to do that sort of thing get used to dropping in early to certain meetings. But we've got to learn how to do that. And how do we pick up indicators that people are having problems or are stressed or have something they want to ask us and they don't know how to do it? And misunderstandings are easier because, again, somebody says something to you, you're not really seeing their body language. You're also not seeing what's happening all around them. You're not seeing what they're trying to do while they're trying to deal with you. So you've got all this scope for misunderstanding. And so we've got to start to build a methodology around managers and support managers, whether that's academic managers or any managers. They need support, they need guidance, and they need support, because this is the biggest revolution since, and the fastest revolution ever, really. Industrial revolution took years and years and years. We near enough overnight completely changed the way that we work. If pandemic had hit 10 years ago, many thousands, if not millions of people across the world would have either suffered in a very meaningful way in terms of being able to work, or would also have died, because you wouldn't have been able to shut down businesses in the same way. So we need to say that, yes, it was a horrible time. Yes, it's a very sad time for many people who lost loved ones, but there are gems of things that we learned that we can take forward that make us better colleagues, make us better managers, and help to be more secure going forward. And with that, I think, I have to do that. The publisher says I have to do that. So yeah, I'll make that go away. If there are any questions, I can't actually see the chat at the moment, but
no, it's not. I can't see anything in the chat at the moment, Wendy.
That's fine.
People seem to be going for hands up more than chat.
That's
so
absolutely fine.
Any hands going up? In the meantime, Wendy, I have to say that I did rather identify with your picture of the dog joining in. if you knew what had been happening in this house, the dog has got back from a walk with my wife, absolutely plastered in mud because she jumped in a stream. And this has all been going on quietly in the background. So the dog is in no fit state to show you at the moment.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Margaret.
Just actually something that somebody was telling me sometime.
You're very quiet, Margaret. A bit closer to the microphone.
Ah, okay. Some years ago, when one company, they went into hot desking, and I was chatting to somebody who was one of the project managers, and she said that what she used to do is when she had the sort of almost the weekly chat with everybody individually, she always used to start with, "And how was your holiday?" or "How have you got has your son got his results from the whatever?" Just to actually do that personal bit before they started talking about business. Is that a good idea?
It depends on the person, obviously, because some people wouldn't take to that. Some people are very sort of, I don't talk about work at home at work, but where it's possible, I think it is. It always shows that people are taking interest. But I also think it helps as a manager if you feel, yeah, I know Margaret well enough that I can say, I know you've just been away on holiday. How was that? Oh my goodness, were you at the airport? Or some such thing like that. So yeah, they're tremendously good ideas. It's about just learning to find whatever works within the teams, really, I think. Oh, it's a chat thing.
Thank you. That was a great presentation.
Thank you. Oh, thank you. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Neil Gordon, University of Hull. I'm talking about teaching external computing remotely. Basic experiences over the last sort of 3 years of sort of pre-COVID, during the initial COVID lockdowns, and then entirely remotely, which fits in with the call for the conference, for this theme in the conference about teaching sustainability remotely. So in the talk, I'll explore some experiences of teaching external computing during the pandemic. This is that context that we had that rapid, unplanned pivot to online learning in early 2020. We had to move from traditional teaching and learning approaches to entirely online. That created challenges for teacher and student alike. In the context of sustainable computing, sustainable development, and green computing, it meant the new opportunities to be able to talk to students about the way that computer science, the computing, IT, was actually an enabler to solving societal problems. So obviously the challenges we faced during coronavirus were things that we're able to use technology to address. And as was mentioned in the keynote in today's event by Judy, looking at some of the ways that people encounter computing as a way to solve the challenges. In terms of context of this, one of the main themes we're looking at is sustainability and sustainable development. And so the concept goes back some decades. So that itself goes back to the 80s, the 90s. This was reformulated a few years ago in some particular goals that nations or world were aiming to achieve. And these were kind of diluted down or focused on 17 particular ones. Now, these 17 goals have been adopted by many countries. Various governments and organisations looking at how do they address these challenges. And we'll look briefly at the UK approach. Now, from the computer science perspective, one way I've sort of framed this is in terms of sustainable computing. Looking at computer science has a role within that sustainability agenda. There's two sides to this, sort of positive and a negative. In terms of negative, there's that challenge to sustainability that computing creates. It uses many resources, the energy for our systems, the precious metals resources we use in manufacturing and creating them. And it's widely impactful on humanity. But equally into more than counterbalance that of positives, in terms of how computing can enable and address other challenges. That's something we look at in a module. I'll talk a bit about that in this talk. So goals, these were focused to these 17 particular aspects. You see the UN website, you can read more about them in detail. In terms of sort of short titles, look at doing things which most people would agree are ethically the right thing to try and achieve. Of course, there's different political and personal viewpoints on many aspects of this. Things like ending poverty, ending hunger, ensuring good health, access to education, are all things that probably most people would say are deemed as good and things we should try to achieve. Some of us become more contentious potentially, depending on interpretation. Things like gender equality, access to sustainable energy, thermal economies and decent work, and building industry and infrastructure, and fostering innovation. These go on to the ones around reducing inequality, sustainable cities and communities, supportable sustainable consumption and production. Think climate action, again, whether or not you agree or students agree that climate action is man-made or humanity is part of the issue. Certainly climate change is causing challenges to society, to humanity. And so one of the aims is looking at how do we address that. Equally, make sure we conserve and clean oceans, protect and restore ecosystems on the land, and promote peace and justice, which again is one of these more political and possibly open interpretation ones. The 17th goal was more of a meta goal, looking at how they could try and support and enable the other goals through appropriate partnerships. And part of that is education for sustainable development, looking at how education institutions across the world at all levels can help prepare students, children, to understand the challenges and hopefully address them as they move on to their careers. As of the United Kingdom, over the few decades, we've had several governments, each has had its own approach to how it addresses the sustainable development challenges, and more recently the sustainable development goals. The current government has a website, so there's a link in the slide, which goes to, for each of the kind of goals, identifies areas where we can try to address it. I've picked out 4 here, purely because these are 4 that mention digital or technology in a way that the government intends to address it. So goal 4, looking at further digital skills and inclusion with using digital capability. Goal 9, using digital technologies to help with economic growth. And work with countries overseas as well, particularly Africa, which again fits in with some of the themes in the conference this week. There's goal 9, looking at how we can support growth and security through relevant partnerships in digital and technology. And say goal 14, looking at championing the form of trade organisation, tackling 21st century trade issues, and particularly around things like digital trade, and other aspects around industry. In terms of the teaching, we're looking at a sort of case study. This is my experiences in teaching at level 4, that's a first year module. The compulsion of allowing students here, so the module size has varied as our intake has varied, particularly between around 140 and 300 students. It's a second semester module, so it runs from January to May, and that timing is quite key to this context. Obviously that period in 2019-20 session meant that it was affected by the first lockdowns in the UK due to coronavirus. And here's a module about understanding students the impact and values of creating on society and the world, and to give a framework to students to think about ethical, legal, social, professional, and other aspects of their future career and their role as professionals. So if they say, well, the BCS aims in it as a professional body too. Also encourage you to think collaboratively and think about innovative ideas to solve environmental and societal problems. In terms of that, we look at various aspects of current problems and things which are emerging and how to identify them, analyse them, and potentially solve them. So some examples that we look at in a module or students looked at in teams, things like carbon footprints of our university data centre, looking at the way that e-learning has enabled us to alter student travel requirements and thereby carbon footprint. Think about how we support education and computing across all levels, build that capacity. Looking at social media, how we can use that to encourage wider participation. And looking at the more general economy in our region. Look at how we can use technology to improve health, support users in good security, and also think about how we balance some of the legislation and the professional and ethical challenges to allow for things like data protection and at the same time deal with freedom of information. And we meet these sort of tensions, which then become more complex points to explore and discuss in trying to come to a consensus view of how do we address it. So we've had a change delivery pattern in the last 3 years. So 2018-19, we had a traditional face-to-face type module running on campus. We had a blended model, again, very common in many universities. So we had campus lectures, workshops with blended material online to support that. In the 1920 session, we set off in our normal fashion in the January. In February, we could see the media reports of the great impact of coronavirus. And in March, had to pivot from face-to-face campus learning to entirely online. That led then to the 2021 session, where in planning for that, we planned it and then delivered it entirely online, as we didn't know early on in the 2020 year at what point we'd be able to return to campuses. So to review that again, 2019, it was a campus-based module designed and delivered that way. The weekly lectures that covered theory and gave students access to collectively what they should be looking at, but using some tools like Menti in the lecture room so students could vote on things and give some feedback. We've got lectures routine with Panopto, which meant we could capture the computer display and audio, but it was quite a limited recording. But it's helpful for students who miss lectures. They could review them there. And for most students, it was a very revision resource. So in the 2020 session, we faced the great impact of coronavirus. In March, had to pivot from campus-based to remote delivery. I moved away from campus-based lectures to stream teaching using Panopto, again limited in its delivery mode. We had slides and audio, some limited feedback from students in terms of being able to ask questions in Panopto when we streamed it. But there were quite some issues with lag and other problems there with technology. My initial pivot being unplanned meant content was limited. There was no real time to prepare materials or adapt significantly. We had to adapt the workshops from online, campus-based to online, with demonstrators supporting that. And we found ways to improve that as we went through the semester. So things like breaking down the groups into smaller channels where students can meet with individual demonstrators in small groups and have discussion and help with what we're doing. And that provided a platform then for the later teams that they were going to work in. In terms of the module content, the pandemic gave us some concrete examples to talk about that we could build into module material. For example, the final lecture on campus in the March was on data modeling. And in that lecture, I was able to talk about some of the early data on coronavirus, it's coming from China, and talk about how we could model that in terms of the impact it may have here in the UK. As it turned out, it was actually quite accurate models, even though they're quite basic. So pandemic will give us some different contexts to think about potential computing to solve problems. So we link challenges of the pandemic with sustainability and computing itself and how it would solve them within what became the online lectures, online workshops, and online team projects. As we near the end of the 2019-20 session, we've been planning for the 2020-21 one, where we decided to plan for entirely online delivery. So we're looking at remote delivery of a module on sustainability. We could build on that learning curve and experiences of previous session, and think about how we could demonstrate use of technology to address challenges and enable new ways to live and work. And the key one here was remote study. The students were experiencing this, we were delivering it, and we could look at that from a point of view of what works, what things we need to put in place. One of which was timetable, scheduled times to interact and support the asynchronous activities. And that gave us a way to provide a very flexible approach to teaching, which gets directly related to sustainability in several ways, as we'll consider. So another thing we found was that students struggled knowing how to structure their work or what to do. So one thing I found early on was to give them kind of a model of what they should be doing. So it's kind of a weekly process using several modules and repeated it each week to remind students of what they should be doing. The kind of typical approach we had would be to have asynchronous watching of lecture recordings. So we prepare them 1 week, publish them for students to watch, how to give them a way to understand some of the large-scale material, and then that was supported by synchronous live workshops online. Again, they're broken into smaller groups with demonstrators, typically high-level students, postgraduate students, who would help them work through material and help talk through issues they had and guide them what to do. As they wanted to understand how far they'd got with that, they could work on formative activities, doing things like peer comments on submitted work, like draft posters or essays, and also doing like trial quizzes, which would assess some of their knowledge and application of their knowledge. As they were happy with that content, they can move on to the summative activities, which were similar sort of quizzes that assess their ability to apply some of the knowledge and demonstrate that they'd at least grasp some of the key concepts. Also a team project later, where they could try combining these to build a digital artifact, so a website, piece of software, a digital report, looking at some aspect of sustainability. And each week they were then advised to make sure they were regularly reviewing materials, catching up on miscontent from other weeks. So we had basically a plan for what we had to do each week. Another thing we found was helpful early on was to ensure we emphasised to them how much time to spend. We discovered from talking to some students that early on in their studies online, they'd assumed that the online synchronous timetable slots of an hour or 2 hours a module was all of their study. So reminding them that study was full-time, 35 hours a week notionally, and that with 3 modules a trimester, they should be doing 12 hours per module per week. In terms of the actual sustainability content that we could then link to experiences online teaching and during coronavirus, we looked at how the pandemic had created challenges, how it related to sustainability, and how computer science and computing could solve them. So things like issues with various lockdowns meant people couldn't go shopping, but online shopping, shopping sites, and the ability of shops to be able to manage their delivery and logistics through computer tools were a good example of this. Working remotely, so for study and work, looking at how we use virtual meeting spaces, collaboration tools like MS Teams and Google Docs to enable people to keep functioning in spite of lockdown. As students, big focus there was on studying remotely, just looking at virtual environments and how to use them effectively. So the big part of this is to say, well, technology has been around for several years. They've been adopted to lesser or greater extents. They have some issues in them, and we looked at ways that students could think about how do they design and build the next generation of tools that will be even better. And then things like how we manage and deliver and assess remotely, how we enable students to do things like collaboration online, and support them with the learning through lecture recordings and capture. Some of the early talks in this conference have spoken about some of the mental health issues and challenges during coronavirus. And we looked at a way that social separation and travel restrictions were causing problems, but how again technology could help alleviate them to some extent. So virtual meetings, social media, and support virtual communities. Again, some issues that Julie was talking about earlier, and other speakers spoke about in yesterday's talks. Other things like pandemic modelling using computer tools to understand the impact and spread of live pandemics. And again, as James spoke about in his talk yesterday, looking at how virus modelling could be used to help identify and develop things like effective vaccines to help treat coronavirus. As computer scientists, another part of that is giving people the skills and knowledge to understand information online. I know there's critical skills built aside where something is purely one person's opinion, might be several people's opinion, but it's still just a collective view, or where it's actually based on evidence, and let them understand how to use tools effectively to decide on what would be reliable data and statements, and what things should we question more. And partly related to that, the fact that this mass move to online living in various ways was creating many more opportunities for cyber criminals. So again, as computer scientists, being aware of the challenges, aware of the tools, and looking at how we develop next generation solutions to help our future users. A lot of this was framed around there's things we can do with technology, there's things perhaps we should do with technology, there's things we want to do with technology, and these can be in tension. Again, one of the things around there is like traveling on holidays, virtual travel reduces carbon footprints. It's very effective when you're not allowed to move because of lockdowns. But equally, if you talk to someone who can't go on holiday, they could just visit somewhere through a virtual tool like Google Maps. They probably wouldn't be happy. So there are challenges here as well. So again, we're talking about the ethical and judgmental points of this. So students can explore the issues. In terms of what we found with students' experiences in remote learning compared to the mixed learning of previous years, our module evaluation questionnaires give us some scoring of that. So 2019-20 session was that hybrid year one. We set off on campus and moved to online. The module score for that was 4.1 out of a maximum of 5, where 5 is sort of a good score, the best score. The purely online one had a lower score, so it wasn't terrible, but it was say measurably lower, which indicated some of the challenges students were finding in purely online environments, where they'd lacked that initial getting started a few weeks to understand what they should be doing and what their module was about, what their learning was about, also to establish some of their community and peer groups. The kind of feedback we got from the purely remote learning, students said they found it hard to manage their own study, they found it hard to collaborate, and they felt unsure what to do, in spite of us giving them quite explicit guidance in terms of how to study, what things to do. I think one of the other talks yesterday spoke about the problem in the sense of we gave students so much information, they found it hard to manage and look at all that information. So there's a problem there in terms of information overload. So in conclusion, the COVID pandemic has had a massive impact on teaching globally at all levels, from primary up to tertiary. In terms of sustainability, lockdowns have shown us how fragile many of our systems are, but also shown that there's that capacity in people to switch over quite quickly to other ways if there's that demand. As we found from the coronavirus, that students and staff expect very flexible lives now. They want to be able to engage in different systems, to work in different ways, to sometimes come to campus, sometimes work from home. And that creates new challenges for educators. The pandemic has demonstrated how computing could address societal challenges, like bespoke apps, software, video conferencing, etc. And what we've seen is the challenges of the COVID pandemic from 2019 to now and onwards have given us many operative problems we should consider is how they'll address through computing. So if you have talk of interest, and if you have any comments or questions or queries or follow-ups on this, do contact me. Thank you.
Lovely, thank you, Neil. That was really fascinating. Really enjoyed that. Thank you.
Thank you.
That was great. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the 5th session of the conference. So this section 5 is looking at absolute intelligence. So our first talk, 1.5 till 2.15, is on AI serving the economy and society, public policy and standards in Europe, with Renaud Di Francesco starting the talk. And we're aiming for about 20 minutes of talk, 5 minutes of Q&A, and a bit of handover time, which gives a bit of leeway as well. So thank you, Renaud.
Thank you very much for introducing me, Neil. Thank you, distinguished audience, for giving me your time just after your lunch. And I will speak on behalf of a group of 3, which comprises Domenico Squillace, who is the president of Uninfo, which is the national body for digital standardization in Italy, which carries the contribution of Italy to global standardization and to EU standardization, and Luigi Carozzi, who is a technical director of the GPDP, which is the Italian authority in charge of data protection. And they do GDPR, they do the Data Act, and everything protecting the public and the companies regarding data. So the topic of the talk today is AI serving the economy and society, the public policy and the standards in Europe, meaning the European Union. But in that case, we understand that the United Kingdom and other countries from the CEPT area, that is the region of Europe, have also an intention to support what will be defined to be compulsory in the European Union, but optional in the rest of Europe, but of course of interest to any company based in the UK or on the continent supplying in EU. So the overview of this presentation is given here. I'll introduce the topic. I will go into some more detail about the phenomenology and AI criteria, which the way we see them for standardization, what to standardize, what to not to standardize, and the question of AI data, quality and governance for the AI data, and going from basic digital systems to systems using AI, what do we need to pay attention to? And of course, we are aware that this conference has a mainstream thought, which is e-learning, and therefore this is still on our mind when we speak of this. And going from a single system to multiple systems using AI, and imagine cars and horses and cycles on the road, on the same road, they share the resource, they share responsibilities towards pedestrians, and so it's going to be something similar, if not more complex with AI, and we'll discuss this. When it comes to the European Union, when it regulates, it insists on AI to respect European values, and where are these values defined? And so human rights and the like, and we'll address this a little bit. For the scope of technology development, AI data, the challenge of governance and of management, AI risk, will illustrate that. And then we haven't escaped the topic dominating the conference, which is education. Education for AI, meaning the roles of people in AI, educating for those. And the other way to look at AI is what use you can get from AI when trying to educate people. So of course, we'll take account of the recent acceleration of the digitalization of education, which has been presented in many previous sessions. Education for AI, education with AI, and then discussing AI and education as a green field where experiments can be done, but with a lot of care, because education in itself is never an experiment. It has to be right. Conclusions and perspectives are probably to be given not by me, but by people more knowledgeable who might want to intervene. So now in more detail, we have the EU AI Act, which has been published by the European Commission a few months ago. This document is still not completely agreed. It is being discussed, as always, for important matters at the European Council and then at the European Parliament. And some amendments might be made by these institutions. The European Commission having the responsibility to propose and then to finalize the text. Then coming with that regulation is the question of standardization. When you want to implement a regulation which has many technical aspects, it's to be expected that standards are needed to support this technical aspect, to check that these technical aspects are met. And so going from regulation to standards, you have a process which goes through harmonized European norms for which the Commission has issued a standardization request. So this mechanism is ongoing. It's been started 3 weeks ago, and everyone is working on it now. I'm currently in Brussels, especially to discuss this matter. So, but why standardize? That's a question which comes as a very natural one, especially in computer science and IT technology, where you are used to de facto standards, to practical developments from software developers, from open source frameworks which are non-prescriptive, etc. But in some cases, you want to be a bit more specific. For instance, if you want interoperability, if you want plug and play, you might want to have a detailed common standard. For instance, I have Bluetooth, and the device with Bluetooth and the headset with Bluetooth communicate properly, or the car with Bluetooth and the device communicate properly. This is interoperability. This is an obvious rationale for standard. And USB is another case, Universal Serial Bus, which has dual function, energy and data. And you have also a very strong rationale understood immediately by the software community ecosystem creation. If you want to have developers to be interested by your problem, you can create a standard, and if the standard gathers a lot of attention, it will also gather a lot of energy from those developers. So you create a critical mass on the supply side, and you create also visibility and a critical mass on the demand side. It attracts customers as well. For procurement, if you have to issue a call for tender, if you are an administration, if you are a large company, you issue a call for tender, and then you want technical features in what you want to buy. It's much easier to have a standard to refer to, and your suppliers will have to check the boxes and implement this standard. It's going to be much easier for you, much more transparent. Than if you have a specification which is very proprietary, cannot be checked, etc. Later on, you might have even legal issues if it's not easy to check and audit what you have done with your call for tender. And so the economic efficiency also is there, because you might have multiple sources when the standard is clear and known to everyone, whereas for proprietary solution, only the author of the proprietary system is eligible. So I represent this on the right-hand side by a triangle: interoperability, ecosystem, and procurement, and I have nicknamed IPE. So the next slide, if it agrees to move, yeah, is on AI data. When we speak of AI systems or digital systems in general, we need to speak of data. Data is the fuel. Data is the wealth of information, of potential information, latent, from which you extract the actual information, and potentially on which you build decisions. So AI data has to be looked into in terms of quality. You might have different purposes to data sets in AI. An obvious one is to train your models. So machine learning, deep learning, etc. You train a model. You need, for instance, pictures, input pictures to train the model to recognize certain features in the pictures. And then if you want to support or generate decisions, you might have to test the impact of your decision based on the different data sets you use. And that's another type of aspect to check with data sets. The data set can trigger action and effect. You can also want feedback and assessment of the outcome on the data set. So this is something which requires a quality assessment for each of these needs in the specific case. Therefore, maybe criteria to be standardized will help you to know if your data set is appropriate and where to improve it if it's not, and or sanitize it. And the governance is how you manage it, how you handle your data properly, between quotes, to be respectful of people, their needs, and law, and the society, etc. So you need to define your roles towards the data sets, as it has been done for GDPR, for privacy protection. Who is the beneficiary of the use of data? Who is the owner of the rights on the data access? And who is actually doing the work? They might be different roles. And the responsibilities, what do you expect people to do? The policies and regulation in force. For instance, I mentioned already GDPR, the regulation protecting data privacy, AI Data Act, and maybe something on cybersecurity and other principles which you might find in law. And so you want to handle data with care for robustness, resilience to adverse events, to context-generated events, system-generated events, human-generated events, which might be acceptable, desirable, adversarial, or unintended. In all cases, you might want to have a robust standard. And that's what we are trying to develop in this new ad hoc group from CEN-CENELEC. And please note that CEN and CENELEC are CEPT organizations, which means that countries like Turkey, Switzerland, and UK are members of it. And the BSI is the interface for the UK. So UK is covered. Now, when you want to move from a basic digital system to a system which is a bit more elaborate because it uses some AI, then you have to ask yourself, does my system learn, decide, evolve? And in that case, question of stability and fairness of the decision is asked. When you want to put your system on the market, if it's a machinery with a software inside, let's say it's a tractor which decide automatically tasks to perform in the field, then you want to put this on the market. What is your conformity assessment procedure? So for this purpose, we have a global activity which is between ISO and IEC, a joint technical committee in the committee SC42, which addresses AI. We have a standard here, which is given as an example of an existing reference, which does the assessment of the robustness of neural networks. I recommend those of you interested to read it. Now, more generally, for Europe, we are now reviewing the global standards, and we are ready to develop new ones if the European market and society need them. I'll touch some words about some care needed when you have not one AI system, but multiple AI system, which you can see on this figure. I've represented 3. So those 3 systems, which are supposed to be fairly independent, possibly, they might coexist and be aware of each other. That's the first minimum degree. They might exchange some information. They might also share some resource between themselves. And that's coordination, IT systems coordinating with AI, with intelligence, understanding each other. Cooperating is when you identify, you negotiate and identify a mutual benefit, and then you work together towards it. And it's beneficial to do that. And something which you might have done on your own will become easier, will become faster if you cooperate very often. That's the rationale. Now, at some instances, you might need to compete. So let's say I happen to work for Sony. So let's say this is Sony, this is Samsung, this is LG. They compete. So you might see a resource contention as well. So that might be Mr. Smith and Mrs. Jones and let's say Miss Muller, and they want to access a printer, and they might compete for it, and you might have this resource contention. Oppose, they might oppose here, and this is an adversarial behavior. So a cyber attack might come, and this is adversarial, but it could be a different type of adversarial behavior, people opposing each other. And if it's possible in the human domain, it's possible in the machine domain. European values. Now, after speaking of adversarial, let's speak of the good things in the world, human rights. So human rights, you find two major sources of law concerning human rights in Europe. Of course, you have the United Nations in addition, but let's stay in Europe for the purpose of this presentation. So the Council of Europe, which is much broader than the European Union, has a European Convention on Human Rights. The European Union has an EU Charter of Fundamental Rights. So in the EU, the two are applied. In the UK, you have this charter, this European Convention on Human Rights. It was first signed in 1950 in Rome, and everything has been kept. So the protocol is extremely interesting because there were some reservations from signatories. So for the first signature, there was only UK having a reservation on this European Convention on Human Rights. And it's quite appropriate to mention it today because most participants are from the UK and because the topic is education. The reservation of the United Kingdom in 1950 was about the right to education. They were not completely 100% supportive of the right to education. Their comment was, it has to come with a reasonable price. And only UK thought that way. So it's been in the minutes, it's in the treaty. And interesting to note, probably the UK has evolved, but it will come back again with the issue of Brexit and the difficulty to find overseas students paying 3 times more than the British nationals for the same studies. And so maybe the price tag on education is a problem in the UK for the students themselves, by the way, except in Scotland.
5 minutes left.
Sorry?
5 minutes left. Okay.
Yes, okay. So let me now move to AI risk, which is we need to identify and manage this risk. We need to take account of the dynamic nature of risk, which evolves during the lifetime of a system. And there is an approach there. Between the AI Act and the standards, we speak of risks. Now, that's my last slide. I have only a few minutes left. Let's spend them well. Educating for AI, that's very important. We can help people coexist with AI. Imagine factory workers who have to work with robots. They can be educated, trained to better cooperate with the AI. The consumers can be trained to use AI. The professional users in data are trained to use AI in data search and studies. Developers, of course, can be trained to use machine learning and so on. But every scientist needs a bit of AI today. So an inventory of the professional roles in AI can be done, but it's not been done yet completely comprehensively to my knowledge. But we have an EU project called Edison, which has delivered an inventory of data scientist roles. And that could be the starting base for the methodology. As for educating with AI, it's a topic which needs to be handled with extreme care. Television has been used in the 1960s with catastrophic results to replace, between quotes, human teachers. And we don't want that error to repeat itself. So education management and delivery can be safely supported by AI, for instance, scheduling and planning. Learning and assessment can also be supported with AI, and some acceleration is possible thanks to AI, and empowering teachers and enhancing teaching can be done. Lifelong learning might also benefit from AI, but we'll stop there because we think that the participants to the conference have probably something to say about it. Let me open for question.
Thank you. Very interesting talk. So, any of the audience, any questions yet? I know there's been lots in media about issues with bias and fairness in AI.
Yes.
And about the dangers of creating biased systems and discriminatory systems. Do you see that as best be achieved through sort of policies and legislation, or is it best through education of AI and data scientists?
Yes. Thank you very much, Neil, for raising this important topic. We have a standardization item, which is called trustworthiness. I'm not sure if the scientific and academic community is as passionate about trustworthiness as the technology and standardization community, but it is of utmost importance. But it's also a melting pot where you have at the same time trust, explainability, lack of bias, cyber security. So trustworthiness is the answer, but it's not an explicit one. It's something which has to be tackled necessarily. Neil, you are completely right. We don't want biased systems, and it's impossible to avoid them completely. So we need checks and balances, and the robustness of the system, which I have mentioned in one of my first slides, is one aspect of it. But the data, avoiding poison data or insufficient data, it's another way, or biased, but it will not solve everything. So I think maybe going back to the hardcore methodology of statisticians might help. So, but maybe other people have other answers.
I was wondering,
Margaret?
yeah, I was wondering if I could raise an issue that worries me a little bit, and I don't know whether it's going to come into the work that you're doing, but whether you're going to need to have official audits like you do for quality. So you would actually have official AI, shall we say, AI auditors, as you just have, quality auditors. And also the second part was, I was wondering about problems of if something goes wrong, who is actually going to take the responsibility if it all goes to court?
Thank you very much, Margaret. So I understand your question started with the question of non-discrimination, and your system needs to be fair to every background of people, etc., independently of their race, ethnicity, gender, and profile, professional profiles, etc. So that's part of the human right aspect. And this is why I took the liberty, even if it seems a bit strange as a technologist, to spend a few minutes on human rights, because you find a lot defined by the human rights, and then legislation, the top legislation in any country. It's not the constitution or Magna Carta for the United Kingdom. It's human rights charters. And this is true across Europe, and Europe including also UK in that case. And we have to, well, classical legislation starting from human rights applies. That's my short answer. The detailed answer, we need technical systems which make it clear where it has been implemented and by whom. Otherwise, the audit is not easy. And as mentioned in the introduction, the IPE rationale for standard is interoperability, procurement, which includes auditability, and ecosystem, which also defines the different roles. So you touch upon a portfolio of very big topics. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was a brilliant presentation.
Thank you.
Yeah, very interesting. Thank you. There's no more questions in the chat yet. Anybody else want to? We've got a minute left for the final question.
Can I give? Oh, please.
No,
please go ahead.
No, just going to say, when we talked, just following up to my previous question, thinking that you have a lot of organizations like BSI that deal very much with the auditing for quality systems.
Yes.
Do you think that will actually start also developing their own expertise for auditing AI?
Conformity assessment is the first hot topic identified in the Sensenelec Committee on AI, where BSI participates, of course, and is an active participant. So yes, its conformity assessment has to be performed in anticipation when you put software or a service or a product on the market. If it embeds AI, you need special care, and that committee would do that. And yes, definitely, I think they will do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, so right on schedule. So if we move to the next speaker.
Thank you very much.
So thank you. So let's clap. Even though that's very interesting. So Hannah, it's nice to see you. If you can share your screen, we should see that.
Just a second. So can you see my screen now?
Yep, that's working. So switch to presenter.
Yes, sorry, just a slideshow. Okay, is it okay now?
Yep, that's
okay.
working.
Perfect.
So I'll introduce you. So you have about 20 minutes for your talk, and then 5 minutes Q&A.
Okay, sure.
Okay, so welcome to the next speaker this afternoon. This is part of this session on AI. So this is about standardization of artificial intelligence, making a new world brave, support of human requirements in a machine intelligence environment. There are several authors, and we're happy to have Tanaz Makhani here to present. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the introduction. Yes, so here I am actually one of the members, one of the co-authors of this paper. So I have I'm so happy to be here to present the paper. I would be glad to answer your questions as much as I can. So continuing the same topic on AI. So today I want to discuss the standardization of artificial intelligence. And the topic of our paper is making a new world brave with support of human requirements in a machine intelligence environment. So as I mentioned, I had the privilege to work with many experts and co-authors in this paper. So my name is Saharnaz Dilmaghani, and I will be here with you today. So just to quickly have a summary and the introduction to the paper. So considering like the industrial revolutions and what happened, so how the history is changing and changing so fast, now we are in the technology era, and now we are the AI systems are actually the system that we are taking a lot of benefits, but also it's one of the challenges and concerns. So in this paper, we try to address the society relevant aspects of AI, but also focusing on the standardization and regulation perspective. So I'll discuss a little bit about the history of Industrial Revolution and where we are now, but also the industrial organizations that at the international and national levels, and also like what we have in case of standards and regulation. Just a quick overview. Of course, there are lots of standards to come, so most of them are not published yet, but hopefully that will be the case soon. And also a little bit on impacts of AI on humans and main aspects of the AI standardization, and I will conclude the presentation afterwards. So just having a quick overview that we have like Industry 1.0, where everything is started like to forget the basically to start working with cars and basically steam power and mechanization. So that was the whole revolution start from that point, right? And then like with this Industry 2.0, we have like the mass production, assembly lines, electrical engineering energy, came to the field. And next we have like automation. So computers, electronics were on the field, but now we are in a phase that actually Internet of Things, connecting devices together, a lot of information and data, talking about like more than terabytes, but also zettabytes of data, which is like growing so fast. Networks connections are much more easier than before, and everything is connected. And also basically lots of concerns on the cybersecurity, privacy of the whole systems that we are using. So actually right now we are in a crucial moment that is time to find directions and also to unleash AI development so that we can benefit from AI and we can use AI in favor of people and not to be worried about the risks and basically the hazards that it can bring to us, to the society. Maybe it would be good also to capture, I found this chart in the AI index that is published recently in early this year. So actually it was really interesting to see these numbers, and like one of the biggest after cybersecurity, like after cybersecurity concerns, one of the biggest concerns for the organizations to adopt AI is regulations and regulatory compliance. So you can see that 48% of the organizations, this is like worldwide, right? So they agreed that they have like a lot of concerns. Like it's not about the technology, it's not about, because we have like AI was developed even before we have all those tools, the data, etc. But right now it's not about technology, it's not about data, but it's about the fear that if we're going to be safe, if everything is, if all the aspects are calculated or the measures are there. So this regulation is actually playing an important role right now to adopt AI. So that's why the role of standardization actually becomes even more important than before. So in the past, well, before even standardization, human was just the humankind was trying to learn from the mistakes. So we were actually paying a lot. It was really costly to experience and then learn from the mistakes, to not to do the same mistakes again. But after today, well-established standardization procedures and basically all the organizations, international organizations, and also national institutes are really putting together all the procedures and policies, standards to protect the health and safety of society. So that's basically the role, one of the main roles of standardization. But also what we actually see now is that, considering like the AI adoption, we need to do a little bit more on the regulations of this, like the society aspects, so the risks of AI, and also basically what it can bring to society. And so it's a little bit of a different level than what we had, like the manufacturing and the products that was in the past. So in case of the implementation AI, etc., and the results outcomes. So I will catch up those points later, but so with AI, it's not only one stage, so we have to be careful about the whole life cycle of implementation of AI to be safe. So going back to the SDOs, basically standardization development organizations. So we have like international level organizations. So we have like ISO, IES, which is like dedicated for the electrotechnical standardization. Telecommunication standardization comes with from ITUT, but also in European level, it's CEN and CENELEC, which are basically responsible to European standards, also now harmonized standards, and also ETSI, that is in the telecommunication standardization. But it's not the only list, because in each country there are also like we have DIN in Germany, like US, Australia, and basically all the national level organizations that are trying to adopt and also propose standards based on the policies and also based on the regulations that they have within their community. So just to have a quick overview on the AI evolution. So as I've mentioned, it's actually not maybe too much our work so far, but there are actually a lot of things going on the like basically under development. So everything maybe more or less started in 2017. IEEE it started with the basically focusing on the ethics and on the artificial intelligence systems. But then afterwards, in 2018, not long after, we had like SC42 established within ISO IEC JTC1, which was basically the transition from working group 9 to having a subcommittee dedicated to AI, which is like with a couple of working groups, but then now it's grown. It has been grown from that moment, and we have like less than, I think, around 15 published standards, but also there are like 20 or 25 underdeveloped publications that are coming out soon, hopefully. We also, like from 2019, CEN and CENELEC started with the focus group on AI, where the first roadmap talked about the main challenges, and then afterwards the ad hoc groups basically started to work on specific topics. One of them were actually the AI conformity assessment. That was also a discussion related to the previous discussion. So now they're also trying to have this overview and also a roadmap, and then trying to go through, defining standardization, but also to be aligned with standards that are coming from SC42, such as, for example, AI system management 40001, which is going to be basically one of the main standards in the topic. And well, recently, like last year, we had like CEN and CENELEC launched the new joint TC on artificial intelligence, JTC21, where basically the ad hoc groups formed better from focus group to TC, and also like different ad hoc group launched during the time. So each dedicated to particular topic in AI. So basically, to gain confidence that such technology, AI, is safe, sustainable, and reliable, it is important to have a minimum set of standardization that are key. Of course, standardization are not obliged to be applied by the companies, organizations, but it is also important to have the certain level of security and safety that companies should bring. So of course, the standards provide the best practice and also to be competitive in the market. So that's how they are also playing an important role within different organizations and companies. So yeah, this is actually just to give you a view on what are the basically guidance and regulations that are published so far. I think like the most important, maybe one of the most important ones are the EU AI Act that is like taking attentions like not only the standardization organizations, but also the companies. The organizations are looking forward to see like what will be the final draft, and also like beside that also the harmonized standards that will that will be there to support the AI Act to implement and also to address the basically high risk category of the AI applications. So talking about EU AI Act, I thought maybe it would be a good idea to have a quick review. So like there are different drafts are coming and it's still in the draft version, but each time there are a lot of changes, and like basically the most important part from the most important basically point from AI Act is that it introduces basically 4 levels of AI systems that are like limited and minimal risk systems that are okay to be implemented. And we have like on the top unacceptable risks, which are actually prohibited to be implemented in EU. But then there is this large category of high risks AI system that are really everyone is focusing on that how to be how should we define them, and also how to put regulations and conformity assessment to make sure that they are we reduce the risk as much as possible, or if they are not to be prohibited to be implemented. But also that covers a lot of areas of application, so in HR systems, in safety components, in employment, in the basically in the healthcare law basically enforcement, and also critical infrastructure such as like transportation that could really put the health of citizens at risk. So these are just a couple of the applications that are under this high risk umbrella of AI applications. But there are also some rules and obligations, both for the providers and also for the users, that it will be polished, and then also having the harmonized standards that will support the whole regulation of AI Act will be helpful to separate this and also to implement them in a safe and healthy way. So what we also discussed in this paper is actually the impacts of AI on humans, right? So of course, it's not possible to precisely forecast all the impacts because the technology is still growing, and like we see more and more when there is a new algorithm or a new application. But in general, if you want to like we formalize it in these 3 points, so like protecting human life, protecting the protecting humans against other damages, like for example that can come from the like psychological or reputational harm. Also ensuring the fair access to everyone, so it should be inclusiveness without any bias, and also without making any particular group against the other one. So we also address different aspects of AI standardization. So we go through explainability, trustworthiness, robustness, transparency, privacy and security, resilience, efficiency, sustainability, and last but not least, conformity assessment of AI. So I won't go through everything because like the details are first in the paper, but maybe I'll just catch up with some of those options. So for example, for the explainability, based on the definition that we had in the artificial intelligence concepts and terminology, explainability is defined as the property of as a property of an AI system that important factors influencing the prediction or decision that is performed by the system, and that can be expressed like with a really understandable human language. So it's not about changing the algorithm or changing the life cycle, but it's about how to be able to explain it so that everyone can understand it, and not to have this kind of black box of AI that nobody knows what's going on within that. So the whole idea, and also the whole idea of explainable AI, is to define measures, to convert that algorithm, that black box, to something that is transparent, and it's also in line with transparency and trustworthiness of AI, of course, but also to be able to explain all those principles, dependencies, and all the technology in a simple language that everyone, or at least the main actors, can understand easily. And that is, of course, also important for the assessment of the algorithm, because nowadays, like most of the algorithms lies in that, goes into under that umbrella of non-explainable algorithms, like such as neural networks or deep learning algorithms, etc. So the other factor that I want to also mention is the privacy and security. So that also changed a lot during the last basically maybe 20-30 years, especially because like the nature of the data and the data analytics changed a lot. So we had like initially a very small data set, like tabular data, where just anonymization, like these kind of algorithms and techniques were enough to hide the data and, you know, not to reveal a lot of information, or not to be a danger to, basically not to bring danger to individuals' life. But afterwards, like we had like big data, the data grow, like the algorithms, data analytics algorithm were also advanced. So then it was easy to connect the tables together and find the, you know, the dots, and also understand that by filtering the some of the queries, you could understand that who was actually, for example, assigned to a specific disease, which would definitely put the privacy of an individual in danger. So that's why like a little bit more advanced technologies in privacy, or let's say protection strategies, came to the to play the role. But it got even like worse in case of protecting, and also in case of security measures, when we have like AI and machine learning algorithms on board. So that's the place where we have like more on privacy enhancing technologies like homomorphic encryption, differential privacy algorithms, and also like federated learning, things like that, and more are coming. So these are just some basic algorithms, but because now what we have is the connections are more and more stronger. So if you just could find a little bit of a data, which is like also easy, like we have like smartwatch, we have like phones, and also everything is connected. So if you can just grab a little bit of everything, or just a little bit of 50%, for example, of the data, you can connect them and you can understand, or you can learn more than what you should know about a person, considering also the social network, etc. So that's why like we had this kind of evolution also on this side. I think it's not excluded also from the whole topic that the privacy and security measures also increased a lot. So we also have like other aspects here in the list. The trustworthiness aspect is also very important, where together with robustness, so some of them aspects are really working together, especially like the robustness, like it's about how to make sure that if the algorithm is playing with the data that has not seen it before, are we sure that, and can we trust that it will give us still the right decision, or it makes everything like like as it is seen it before? So is it like robust or not? Because that can also bring a lot of dangers in case of like autonomous driving, and also other examples as well. So together they also building the trustworthiness of AI, and again, like they are really connected to each other, but also not to forget the conformity assessment of AI, which is also an important aspect aspect of AI when it comes to AI Act, because like putting all the measures and also the discussion that was about auditing AI, which helps to assess the AI system and also to measure it if we are really can trust a system or not. So there are some activities going on this side on the ad hoc group of conformity assessment in Sensen and Senelec, but I'm also aware of the SC42 activities in trustworthy AI, where they're also working on similar projects to also like the AI system management 42,000. I think that's also the one that will likely will be one of the basics for this conformity assessment of AI. So with this, I'd like to thank you and also to conclude that, yeah, this was basically the main aspects that I want to mention regarding our paper. Was there a question, or did I?
Yes, thanks. Yeah, that's great. Yes, so again, if there are any questions from the audience, you can either unmute yourself or put a meeting chat, put your hands up. I mean, from a education perspective, given these increasing number of standards, what's the implication for sort of teaching next generation computer scientists and AI developers? How do we make them aware of these standards and adhere to them?
Well, actually, in my case, I was part of the program that was initiated by ILNAS, the National Standardization Organization in Luxembourg, and the University of Luxembourg. So that was where I started all this, discovering and also joining different groups, both in ISO and Sentinel. But I think, I think what was from my personal experience. So I had one of my papers were about comparing the methodologies, the research methodology and also find the gaps where where we can find some relative standards there, or if there's a missing standard, so something like gap analysis maybe. And I think that was quite good. It get a lot of attention within researchers. So that's one of the papers that is cited a lot also within my compared to others. I think there is this tension, especially because in case of terminology, defining the like when you come to AI or all those taxonomy, like that's the first place that you can really rely on standardization. Maybe that would be a good place, and that's also one of the things that we will try to kind of discuss and open the discussion when it comes to the research communities, because that's a little bit of a missing point when you are trying to find, connect the different research communities together. But also, I think what can also happen is that like there are a lot of initiatives, especially with Sun and Sun, like to invite researchers and also to have this kind of programs or the talks or the presentations where the topic is not only pure standardization but also inviting researchers and to do this kind of brainstorming. So I think it's getting better and better, and in my case, our group at the university are still promoting this opportunity, and I think like the national standardization organizations are also can really play a great role by connecting to the universities, because for example now in Luxembourg we also have this master program that is about standardization and the ICT sector. So I think these are maybe where you can hear the topic, and also you start searching a little bit to be sure if you can connect your work to it.
Okay, thank you. I see Margaret, your hands up.
I've actually put the question in the chat as well. I've got coming to the same questions I'd asked previously. As a emeritus professor of software quality, I'm particularly interested in the audited aspect of it. And I was wondering if you think you will have specialist auditors, as you have in quality, when you're doing the quality ones, so you have them trained differently and different standards for the business systems or safety critical. Do you think we'll actually develop similar ones with AI? So they have to be not only knowledge about AI, but knowledge within the business specialist areas. Thank you.
Sure, thank you for the very interesting question, actually. Well, I'm not an audit expert, but from what I see is that also like within the company. So I think it's also like when it comes also to AI Act, let me put it that way. So there were a lot of there were a lot of requests from our audit department as well, because I think that's also the important basically, it's going to be one of the important aspects for the audit perspective when we have AI conformity assessment. So that will be definitely a topic that, where you can start the auditing, but also of course, it's not only the, so I think you also mentioned the business analysts, right? So the business experts, that will be definitely important because of the different applications of AI that we have. So it depends on the domain. So definitely it will be not only, I don't think we're just going to come up with one AI conformity assessment for everything. So that's where we're going to definitely need the roles and the business perspectives, so that we can understand the meaning and also the output of that AI, not just the technology and the algorithmic part, which is of course one side, but also the output and the meaning of it, and also those connections of the results and the decision making that is coming out. I think it's totally depending on the business perspective, and that will be the place maybe we might need to even like to have different levels of assessment for different applications, because of the of course the level of the like the risk they have, but also like if it's like in a health sector or it's in a employment sector, that might be make a difference from the business perspective, of course.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. So any further questions? There's one final one which I think fits in with both yourself and maybe Rena as well. There's obviously made some news this week. The Google AI engineer who claimed the Lambda chat toolset is sentient. At what point do you think, when you look at the ethics of recognizing AI as having rights?
Well, yeah, these are actually open questions that they're, of course, that's the ideal world, right? So we want to have the ethics, we want to have all those rules, but also it is very diverse, right? And it's like it's just growing so fast. So I mean, to answer that at what point, I'm not really sure when that will happen. But of course, it needs all those giant companies as well, giant tech companies as well, to also participate, because I know that not all of them are also participating in standardization. So if they also take a role and also facilitate the whole journey, that will be great. But I think that's the ideal goal, that we are all going through that, and also we're trying to get to that point, of course.
Okay, well, thank you. So a virtual claps for you today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Fascinating.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for including our courses here at Hull as well. Okay, so we're now at 2:45. Again, to give people a chance just to refresh and have breaks, a couple of breaks, get drinks and things. We've got a break now from 2:45 till 3:15. So hopefully I can see I think Babatunda is here ready for the next talk. If James or Isaac.
Yeah.
That's...
I just sent an email to the three of them.
Okay.
To suggest that they might like to come along.
Yeah, so hopefully I'll see them a few minutes before the start, at about 3:10, ready for 3:15 start. So enjoy your break, and we'll see you in half an hour. Thanks everybody, really good talks.
Thank you very much.
Don't worry about that. Looks good. That's fine. That's okay.
All right.
That's great. Thank you. Now, you're coming to the dinner tonight, I believe.
Yes, I am.
You have to bring your own food.
All right.
Or eat afterwards, whichever.
Yeah, okay. All right.
But what we're going to do is meet up about 5:30.
5:30.
Have a
Okay.
little chat and then break into smaller groups.
Okay.
About sort of 4 people, so you can meet more people and talk. And come up maybe with some good ideas about maybe the future of this conference or anything else really you want to talk about.
Okay.
And then all come back and see if any to the individual groups have come any brilliant ideas.
All right. That'll be nice.
That's great.
Yeah. Thank you.
Has James asked you to join the panel on Friday, tomorrow?
Yes, I'll be there.
Right. Which country will you be discussing?
Nigeria.
Nigeria.
Nigeria, yes.
Right, okay. That's, so I think we're going to have a good selection of, which country does
Isaac?
that come from?
Yeah, Isaac will be talking about, he's from Ghana.
Ghana,
Ghana.
right, okay.
So I guess
we've
he'll be
got
talking about Ghana.
Ghana, Kenya, and Nigeria. That's a good
Nigeria.
combination.
Yeah.
Great. Now, have we got? We've got your Isaac. I don't think I see Isaac there yet. Maybe here. Here, come soon.
Margaret, you okay? Margaret, can you hear me? Margaret, can you hear me?
Yes. Now,
Margaret,
I've had a lot of trouble with internet connections, and
I know.
for about
Can you
an
hear
hour.
me?
I can hear you.
Okay.
Can you hear me? Okay.
No, I just was wondering.
Yeah.
Uh,
What I'll do is
well,
I think.
and I can see Jeff is sitting behind you.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you know, sometimes you can only see from your mouth upwards. So, well, now it's a bit too much. You can see your breast. A little bit further up. Hi, Jeff.
Hi, Jeff, you can wave. Yes. I don't know whether you can see Jeff. You wave. Yes, you wave. Yeah. I've got the details for the tonight. So far, 8 people are registered to come to the.
I put the video on.
Sorry?
I put the video on too.
So it's bigger.
Yeah.
Okay.
I never put the video. That session with the AI was very good.
It was excellent, wasn't it?
I was a bit lost at the beginning. I couldn't concentrate, but yeah, it's very good.
So hopefully, if you can look at the participants, can you look at the participants on your? You put up participants.
Who do you want me to look at?
Or just click on participants, so you've got the list of them coming up.
Yeah, I have them. There's not many people.
No, that's okay. If you look at the top 5,
yeah.
Yes, you see that in fact you've got a little circle with a red dot in the middle. So that means that it's set up as co-host. So like your name, I've set you up as co-host for the moment. so that this is what.
Yeah, leave it like that. Yeah.
So if anybody is actually showing any slides, like Kirsten, she has to be made a co-host. Otherwise,
Yes, I
she won't be able
understand.
to access her slides.
Yeah. Okay, if you switch to presenter mode. Yep, that's great. Okay, so
Hello.
welcome everyone to the afternoon session. So we've got 2 talks now, and then we have a discussion session at the end of the afternoon. So this first talk is exploring the use of AI applications and development and delivery of biomedical and engineering education online. I've got it's work of 2 colleagues, and Tunde is going to present the slides now. So I'll leave you. You've got 20 minutes or so of talking. I'll reappear on sort of 5 minutes to finish and do the Q&A. Thanks.
All right, thank you, Neil. Hello, everyone. I'm happy to be here, and it's a privilege to be presenting this in this year's edition of the Inspire conference. So I'll be talking on exploring the use of AI application in the development and delivery of biomedical engineering education online. The COVID-19 pandemic is one that we may not forget anytime soon, considering the effect it had on almost every aspect of life. Following the COVID-19 pandemic, the interest, the use, and the various applications of artificial intelligence have increased, and applications have been deployed for use across all sectors, particularly in education. Over the past few decades, human practices has evolved, and the introductions of computation has enabled us to do things we would not have been able to do due to the complexity involved in the tasks. During the pandemic, most institutions were able to switch to the online mode. While there were little or no difficulty with the theoretical-based programs, practical-based programs like biomedical engineering program suffered greatly. And this is because the current platform, the structure does not provide adequate support for remote learning, most especially remote laboratory practicals. So this review therefore seeks to examine the BME education as provided in the UK universities and how artificial intelligence can help advance collaborative and personalized learning experiences. This study aims at examining how AI can help advance in collaborative learning and how we can personalize learning by providing tailored solutions to specific needs, and also how AI can help to individualize learning experience for BME education and instrumentation in UK universities. Some questions to ponder on are: how is AI in education conceptualized, and what kind of challenges and risks are considered? What is the nature of the BME programs in UK universities? What are the modules that are being offered in these universities, and how are they delivered? Also, how are these modules? Also, are these same modules? Are these modules, are they the same across all the universities in the UK? So I'll talk briefly about biomedical engineering program. Biomedical engineering involves combining concepts, knowledge, and approaches from all aspects of engineering discipline with the aim of solving specific healthcare-related problems. BME aims to understand, modify, or even control biological systems by using electrical, chemical, optical, and mechanical principles. This program provides numerous opportunities for interaction between engineers and healthcare professionals. An interdisciplinary field of study like biomedical engineering involves the training of 3 types of professionals, and they are the clinical engineers in the healthcare field, the research scientists, as well as the biomedical engineer in the industry. Over the past few decades, computer-based learning and computer-aided instructions have emerged as tools for teaching using computers. The problem of enhancing the learner's understanding of concepts associated with biomedical engineering education remains a huge area of challenge. And this is because the current learning structure does not provide adequate support for remote laboratory practicals and experiments, most especially for biomedical engineering programs. Some studies have been done to understand how AI can help to improve learning. Previous works have shown that AI application can perform assessment and evaluation of tasks at a very high accuracy and efficiency level. Likewise, there is evidence to suggest that students who received individualized learning achieve their academic goals at a very fast rate compared to those who did not receive individualized learning. So I'll be talking about the tools, the technologies that can be used, the AI technologies that can be used to improve education. The first one I'm talking about is the virtual reality. The use of virtual reality technologies has actually gained a great deal of popularity in educational field due to the unique characteristics. And that unique characteristic is the fact that it enables students to be able to customize their learning. They can be able to simulate themselves and choose how much time they wish to spend on certain concepts. So we can define virtual reality as the use of technologies to construct synthetic and 3D environments that may mix a real world and an imaginary world. It makes it look real. Another tool, another technology is the augmented reality, AR. The goal of augmented reality is to create a multimodal learning environment that encourages students to participate actively in the learning process and also provide them with a more effective means of visualizing and interacting with abstract concepts using multiple senses. The AR experience consists of digital elements that is superimposed in a real-world video, and it creates interactions between the video and the digital element as well as the user. So unlike the virtual reality that replaces the real-world environment with a virtual world by using softwares and hardware, augmented reality creates the perception of the real world in an engaging and immersive method without actually erasing the experience. So as an engaging and interactive teaching tools, artificial intelligence, virtual reality, as well as the mixed reality enhance students' learning experience. In modules, especially that of biomedical engineering, with the use of this technology, laboratory work can be virtualized, lectures can be held in virtual classroom with the students collaborating from different locations. So it won't be any, the location will not be a fixed one. You can collaborate from different locations. So this immersive learning environment can provide hands-on experience as well as it can increase the motivation in the students. Now, imagine a system whereby a student can have an immersive experience of anatomical structure. You're able to go through the human body, you immerse yourself in it. That will create, that will increase the motivation of the student to actually study that module. So an example is one developed by the XXVII. So it is a virtual anatomical laboratory that is based on the holographic images. And this technology by XXVII is being used, it uses polarized glasses with embedded infrared marker. So this approach helps to create a combination between the AR and VR immersion. So the students, they enjoy this approach and they find it a little bit more engaging. So I'm talking about the limitations of experiential biomedical engineering, biomedical education tools for teaching. The first one is the financial limitation. These technologies are quite expensive Therefore, the finances of some educational institution may prevent the use of this technology. Likewise, limited knowledge about its operation can deter the lecturers or any education provider from using this technology. Also, it's more likely that students, by the time they begin to use this, they tend to use the technology more, and then they'll disregard traditional education materials, such as books, libraries, etc. In terms of health, prolonged and frequent use of this technology can lead to medical consequences, such as migraine and vision problem. That's when you begin to use screen often. So as part of this study, we wanted to find out more about the variation in the biomedical engineering education modules across the UK universities, the mode of teaching these modules, and the resources available for the modules. So we used public research data, the university website, the reports, and opinions were also considered. So the data size for this study was gotten from 132 universities, and the data were derived from their websites. So using the rank of 2022 times UK university ranking. Also, the student and program data from the HESA and the QAA were also used to review the BME programs across the universities. So from our findings, we discovered out of the 132 universities, 48 universities offers undergraduate programs, both the bachelor's and the extended one. Also, 23 universities out of the 132 offered postgraduate master's program, Master of Science program. And one thing we discovered is that the BME modules across all these universities vary. The modules are different, but even though they are different, the manner of delivery of these courses are quite similar. I mean, the lectures, the presentations, the assignments, they're quite similar. Most of them use web-based blended learning approach, which involves the use of web-based activities to support the learning activities. So one of the things they use is Blackboard Learn. Some use Blackboard Learn to teach your students. Some use Google Meet, Microsoft Teams. For the video presentations, because some handles presentations instead of physical presentations, they do it online with the use of video tools like Anopto, so which is quite encouraging. However, there's still limitation on how we can access laboratory work using these platforms. Biomedical engineering program, as I said earlier, requires high degree of practical exposure. And the reason is because this exposure is necessary for the development and design of devices, as well as it helps to meet current healthcare challenges. Therefore, modules like tissue engineering, bioinstrumentations, biomaterials, they require more of the practical exposure. Unfortunately, some of the universities have restricted access to certain equipment that are available. Because of the COVID-19 restrictions, there's limits to the number of students that could access the laboratories that are available. And some of the universities that have these facilities, they don't give equal access to everybody, to all the students. Like you can't just decide to go to the lab and carry out an experiment. It has to be monitored, and it has to be scheduled. So therefore, the number of facilities and learners access to the available ones is a little bit restricted and limited. And this lab, this experience is one thing that is very crucial to biomedical engineering programs. So I'll be talking about the experimentation environment that we have. So traditional hands-on lab involves high costs associated with the equipment, the space, and the maintenance of staff. So a line of research is currently growing for how lab costs can be reduced by taking advantage of online. Therefore, to characterize different modalities of experiments of experimentation environments, and to provide precise definitions of online labs, two criteria were proposed in a previous work that was done by Domido. One of the criteria is that it's about the way resources are assessed for experimental purposes. So in this criteria, you can group the environment to be a local or a remote environment. Also, another criteria is according to the physical nature of this lab. So the environment could be classified as a real or simulated environment. For the first one, which is the local access to real resources, this involves the combination of the hands-on, the traditional hands-on lab, whereby the student is in front of a computer that is connected to a real laboratory plant. The second one, which is the local access to the simulated resources, this environment is a software-based one, and it works with the experimentation interface, works by through simulation of experiments. The third one, which is the remote access to real resources, here real plant equipment is accessed through the internet. The user remotely operates and control a real plant through an experimentation interface. And this approach is also refers to as the remote lab. While the fourth one, which is the remote access to simulated resources, this form of experimentation is similar to the remote access to real resources, but the difference is that it replaces the physical system with a mathematical model. So the student operates with the experimentation interface on the virtual system to reach through the internet. They do this through the internet. And because it is a simulated process, it can be instantiated to serve anyone who asks for it at any time. So this process is called the virtual laboratory. So the benefits of the virtual and remote labs are hereby listed. And one of it is availability. Virtual labs and remote labs are available at any location at any time. You can access it from anywhere, any location in the world. And it offers collaborations. The sessions can be observed by many people. People can engage themselves, which is one of the advantage of physical laboratory. The collaboration is quite needed. Also, when it comes to safety, virtual lab provides a safer alternative to hands-on laboratory for experiments. You need to worry about hazardous experiments or what may happen. So it's quite safe and quite accessible to everyone, regardless of any disability that anybody has. So virtual lab offers equal opportunities to everyone that is using it. So some current trends in this biomedical engineering device tools are, the first one I'm talking about is the Google Augmented Reality Microscope, which is developed by Google. So this ARM uses machine learning to analyze biological tissue samples and automatically detects the anomalies that is caused by a cancerous cell in the body. So this microscope has augmented bright field microscope, and it is attached to a computer with a pre-programmed deep learning algorithm. And with the aid of this system, pathologists can actually scan large images of a whole slide more rapidly to detect cancer. Another one is the X Micro VR. This offers a virtual reality tools that can be shared among up to 6 6 or more simultaneous users simultaneously, and it enables remote collaborations among scientists. The combination of the nanoscale imaging techniques, expansion microscopy, and then virtual reality enables the analysis of cell structures. This is quite helpful for programs such as the tissue engineering, whereby you need to work a lot with cells. Also, another one is the Convoca VR. It's also a virtual reality, and it was employed to examine the complex organization and composition of cells and distribution of protein and molecule. With this device, users will be able to manipulate the displayed image by rotating it and changing the scales to focus on any area any area of specific interest. And also, there's another one is the Microsoft HoloLens. So this HoloLens is a mixed reality technology, and it is head-mounted, and it allows engineers and professionals to view 3D images, such as the anatomical structure. It makes this process to be interactive and engaging, and provides greater clarity to what they're actually studying. Some lab solutions are the LabShare Consortium, the Go Lab, the High Lab. So all these ones they create a shared network of remote labs that will be used for the biomedical engineering education, the lab, laboratory work, and practical work as well. And it can also be used with any other modules that requires the use of experiment or laboratory. So in conclusion, as a result of the COVID-19 and the advancement in technology, the recent shift towards remote learning and work practices have advanced even faster. So it has been established that many of the biomedical models could benefit from this integration of AI, and virtual experiments could be run from biomedical engineering laboratories, which can provide equal access to students. And in addition, the use of AI would significantly reduce the workload of the instructors and the lecturers in this field by automating assessments, feedbacks, similarity checks with high degree of accuracy without human intervention. Therefore, based on the current research findings, it is expected that the applications of AI will improve student learning outcomes, and that management of online education environments will become more effective by looking into this area by incorporating AI into the online education environment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's an interesting talk. So, as usual, if there's any questions from the audience, and then from there now, I see some clapping. So yes, I'll clap out. Thank you. So any questions? I've posted them into meeting chat. Or raise your hand. I think Margaret, put your hand up.
Yeah, I was actually interested in. I think the opportunities are fantastic, but how easy do you think is it to introduce this to universities maybe that aren't involved with such high tech? I'm thinking particularly of using these as approaches with possibly less developed, well-developed universities.
Yeah, currently work is still going on how to incorporate this technology into it, but the major limitation is the financial aspect of it, because this technology is quite expensive. But those in the developing country might find it difficult to actually use this technology. However, developed countries are still working on it. They're looking for there are machine learning algorithms that they are currently working on, that they are looking for a way to create a fusion between the current current structure and see a way whereby they can incorporate the algorithm to make the experience more engaging. So currently, there are labs such as the Lab Share Consortium. So what they do is to they share a network of laboratories. They create real-time data from students from physical laboratory. So they try to create it in a way and study the experience of the physical lab and see how and see a way whereby they can engage people and how they can maybe reprogram it, towards the online. Then I'm not sure if I'm able to answer your questions.
No, that's fine. Thank you very much. And it was a very interesting presentation. Thank you.
Right.
Yeah, more a comment from Yoge in the meeting chat about some of the tools in Google Play, like 3D Anatomy.
Yes.
Have you looked at any existing sort of examples it could be easily adopted, or is it a case of creating new ones?
Okay, there's some tools in Google Play. Yes. Yeah, currently there are some tools that could be used, and most of these tools are virtual reality tools. So they require the use of the headset. So they are wearable devices. But the limitation is that most of the current structures, the current modules, they don't really have educational, will I say, material, or the current structure does not really support the virtual reality devices. Most of the ones we have are they are basically games. But how to recreate, how to refocus the physical classes, the experience to this virtual reality technology is the current challenge that is under that we are trying to understudy. We're trying to see how a way whereby we can recreate this experience instead of the physical class, the physical experiments, the physical laboratory, how we can recreate this same experience but in a virtual way through the use of artificial intelligence. And I believe by carrying out more study on this, this will be achievable.
Yeah, thank you.
Can I say something as well?
Yeah, sure.
Ask basically because I'm too naive in this area, but I was wondering what is the role of the educators, the teachers, the doctors, I suppose, that we are going to teach face to face in a lab, in a mortuary, in whatever they are doing. This face-to-face experience, how is the lecturer prepared? Because even the lecturers don't have enough. Basically, we need to educate first the lecturers, the teachers. What do you think, Babatunde?
Yes, you are. Thank you very much. Yes, you are right. And this is one of the limitations that I talked about earlier. Because if you are creating a technology, you need to also teach those that will be using this technology. And during the COVID-19 pandemic, most of the theoretical-based courses had no issues. They had little issues with it. But practical-based programs really suffered during this period because the current structures does not provide how to do practicals remotely. So, but with the AI, and by training the educators, the doctors, or anybody that will be using this technology, I believe that it will go a long way in assisting and improving the level of education that is being given to the students. So you're right about that. Teachers, lecturers, educators, doctors need to be aware of this. They need to be trained on how to use this technology.
And you need technical support at the same time,
Technical
all
support.
the time.
Yes,
All
yes,
the time.
yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you.
Very well done. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. There was another addition from Jorge in the meeting chat, a relevant paper.
Thank you.
This one's maybe have a look at that afterwards, I guess. So thank you for that. So we go immediately. So it's getting on the time. So thank you, Babatunde. So,
All right. Thank you.
and if we can, if Isaac, if you can share your screen again, I can see you now.
Yes, all right.
Yeah, if you make sure you're sharing your PowerPoint screen. Yeah.
Is that us?
That's it, yeah. So if you start the slideshow.
Can you see?
We'll see it's in the presenter, it's in the slide sorter view. So you can see the standard view with the slides on the left and the main one on the right and the main one in the middle. So if you go to slideshow itself.
All right. Is it up now?
Yeah, that's great. Okay, so the next talk this afternoon is a human capital risk reporting, nature intelligence through AI and online learning by a company listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange. This is work by Isaac and James, and Isaac is presenting now. Thanks, Isaac. I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Neil. Like rightly said, this is from an interesting perspective because we're looking at a typical business-related research that is trying to marry education and then the use of technology. And so that's the background to this, where we're trying to identify to what extent companies report on their human capital from a risk perspective. That was the original plan by developing a framework that enables them to do this. But while doing this, one of the findings was the eagerness for some of these companies as part of their community engagement, or what a business person would say, corporate social responsibility, are eager to show the things they are doing to promote education, mainly for the purposes of this conference. So a bit of a background to this. So human capital simply means, in basic sense, the skills, talents, and abilities people bring on board. And as we have seen since the commencement of this conference, we've exhibited various talents and skills in our research work in how we can use AI and then technology to enhance education. So as in around 1963, Emerson decided that companies or organizations or even economies more often than not focus on physical and financial resources to the neglect of the human capital or an intellectual capital, which technology fits into beautifully. So he argued that human capital are as important as the physical capital. So upon much deliberation, the agreement was, how then do we account for people in organizations, more so the risk pertaining to people? So when you see the cover slide to this, human capital risk, here we are defining as organizations minimizing the exposure of risk their people encounter, where at the same time putting in place measures that ensure that their human capital thrive, and coming up with a framework that would help organizations tell the public how well their employees or their people are doing. More often than not, we see that a typical annual report will be dominated by figures. How about the phases behind the figures? The argument is, the more you focus on the people, the more you are exposed to more value creation avenues. In this respect, education being our value creation element, as we will see as we proceed with the slides. So on this slide, you see on one side, people struggling to cope, facing various risk issues. In a typical workplace or even in an education setting, this risk will pertain to lack of training or lack of the right competencies in delivering what is expected of you. Then there is the welfare bit, where we would see employees not being treated well, where we will see issues with inequalities in payments, in salaries, in compensations, in rewards and opportunities, where there are issues about gender balance and in all this. Then on the next picture, you see that that risk situation has been saved. You see that palm forming a bridge to allow the employees to safely cross over. So this is the idea of how we are defining human capital risk, minimizing exposure to losses, at the same time creating opportunities to ensure that your people do not only survive, but thrive as well. And a bit of how this research came into being, the gap within the literature found out that more often than not, business researchers focus on people at the detriment of risk. They are normally treated in isolation or as a standalone. But you would agree with me that no matter how talented or skilled you are, being a researcher or an educator or a lecturer, more often than not, on a daily basis, you encounter certain situations that may expose you to losses, or certain situations that would expose you not giving your optimum. So Becker and Smith were like, why don't we look at human capital and then risk together? And because it's quite a complex area, not many researchers have tried to do work in this field. But when it comes to reporting about people in organizations, one of the early researches within the developing world was by Abesikara and Guthrie, who looked at the Sri Lanka Stock Exchange. They came up with some human capital items to find out to what extent do listed companies report on their people. Subsequently, there have been other research, particularly in the UK, where Roslender and the others, as well as McCracken, have looked at human capital reporting by looking at companies listed on the London Stock Exchange, for example. So based on the literature and for the purposes of this particular presentation, we settled on two research objectives. One, to analyze how companies listed on the Ghana Stock Exchange report on their human capital. We're using one insurance company as a case study for this. And their approach to this was to use a content analysis of the annual reports to find out how well these companies report on the output or the contribution of their people. The second research objective was to analyze and understand how an exemplar of a human capital risk reporting disclose information about its community engagement. So, as we will see from this framework, we developed a framework that should help us identify the extent to which companies report on their people. The framework basically is based on four main categories. We have the competence risk category, the talent development risk category, the employee well-being category, and then the equity risk category. So with the competence category, we're looking at elements like commitment, flexibility, leadership. All this we would see in a typical researcher or a leader of a business or a lecturer. Then the next one was how to develop these competencies. So we see issues with apprenticeship, career development, graduates, internship programs. So if this is in a typical academic setting, you would want to see things like tutorial opportunities or workshop opportunities for teaching assistants to help them enhance their teaching skills. Then we have the employee welfare risk category, where this presentation will be anchored upon because we're looking at community engagement. So taking a typical annual report, looking at corporate social responsibility and sustainability, we're looking at to what extent have companies reported on how they have engaged within their communities, specifically in terms of education. Interestingly, in 2016, the UK passed a law that enjoins companies to report on their employees, 1, 2, their community, and then 3, the environment. And this builds into the argument of sustainability. In fact, now, a lot of researchers are trying to understand how even within the lecture rooms, teachers will be able to bring to the awareness of students the need for sustainability. Then there's the final category, which we won't focus so much on in this presentation, that talks about equity risk. So you take a typical annual report, you want to see to what extent is a company diverse, to what extent are issues concerning equity, equality, gender balance, transparency, human rights, and rewards have been addressed in annual reports. So this is a broad overview. We're still warming into where our fish is. Looking at that particular insurance company, analyzing the annual reports within the employee welfare risk category, because that is where we have community engagement, we realized that they reported on issues relating to community engagement only 4 times in the annual reports. In fact, this is the 2019 annual report. Then we looked at engagement amongst employees and in their community twice, issues about employee ethics once. There was no report on whistleblowing. There was nothing mentioned about employee trust on ethical issues. Health and safety, which is normally popular in any organization, came across 4 times. Employee relations, nothing was mentioned about employee relations. Employee fraud, just once. Employee turnover, nothing was said. Employee well-being came up once in the annual reports. So this gives you a fair idea, because one would assume that in an era of integrated reporting, you would find a bit more of information on some of these human capital items, but it is not forthcoming still. And this gives us a pictorial view of the items we discussed. The bigger portion of the cake went to the corporate social responsibility aspects of reporting. So within this corporate social responsibility aspect of reporting, that's where we found a bit of a gem, which for me was interesting. And myself and then my co-writer decided that this is worth exploring further. And it was this narrative in the annual report. I would want to read verbatim. It says, the main beneficiaries of our financial literacy program were students, teachers, and parents of Bishop Mixed JHS. The objective of the program, among others, was to improve the economic prospects of the beneficiaries by helping them develop financial management skills for saving and investing for the medium to long term. Over a period of 3 months, students, parents, and teachers were taken through topics such as how to budget, how to save, how to prepare a will, among other things. The program, content, and teaching were all carried out by staff of Enterprise Group. and this is a typical narrative from a business, you would read in between the lines to rightly see that the motive was to educate those mentioned here about financial literacy. But as I was researching, it became more interesting in the sense that when they decided to visit these schools to educate them about finance, they realized that the school really needed more than financial education. Students were being taught in dilapidated buildings that were nearing collapse. There were no facilities which would enhance the experience of these young students. So upon interviewing them, the idea was, this is a challenge. Had they not reported this, it wouldn't have opened the bigger lens for them to know that, no, this is not enough. We have been applauded for going to educate these children about finance, but we saw for ourselves the conditions in which they are studying. We could do more. So the management of this company decided that we will build a new block of classrooms for them. And this they decided to do. But what would education be today without technology? They went a step further to decide that, okay, we will fit into our plan a computer lab where we would use modern technological tools to help teach the students. This, mind you, is not from the Ministry of Education. This is not from People and Culture. This is from a typical business that their basic interest is to make profit, going out of their way to give back to community. And I felt it is something that is worth digging deeper. So that was their 2019 annual report. Then in 2020, they had this to say: community investments main activities were in the areas of education and health. Education, construction of a modern 3-story classroom block for the Bishop JHS in Accra, which cost them millions of Ghana cedis. The project expected completion date was in September. And then students and parents of the school were all taken through, once again, the financial literacy education. So this was a plan hatched after a first visitation to the school. Then in 2016, they fulfilled their promise. They built a very, very well-equipped 3-story block for this school, fitted with computer labs with computers, where children are being exposed to online education and then simulated virtual programs that gradually is introducing these children in a small community, although in the city, in a very small suburb, because we have city slums or city suburbs in Ghana, in the capital city, Accra. So those children are now being exposed to modern technological tools where they can learn online, where they can replicate virtual simulations in their computer labs. And you wouldn't see more of this across board. You wouldn't see more of this often, but there we have it. That was the aspect of the content analysis. Then looking at following up with interviews, because one limitation of previous research was just to focus on content analysis of what has been reported in the annual reports without going behind the figures to understand why these things are there. So upon interviews, we found out that the main motivation for them disclosing this community engagement, which was a risk situation, in the sense that when you have a growing population who are not well educated, who are not technology savvy, it trickles in to their future growth, even as prospective entrepreneurs or prospective employees or wherever they will find themselves in the future. But the main motivation for doing this was regulatory driven. regulatory driven in the sense that the regulator of the Ghana Stock Exchange have decided that companies should tell us what they are doing to enhance the communities in which they operate. So that was the main motivation why they even decided to report this in their annual reports in 2019. And you see how things have quickly developed since then. One report led to an identified problem, which was reported, which further led to another identified problem, which has been reported. And what this does is that it adds to the goodwill of such organizations, and we would encourage more businesses to invest in education, to invest in technology, to invest in artificial intelligence, because what these children have been exposed to is giving them an opportunity to enhance their natural talents. And who knows what will become of them in future. Let me quickly say this. There have been instances where in Ghana, science students who qualify to be in top-notch universities, the MITs, the Oxfords, the Cambridge, the Harvards, have performed very poorly in international robotics competitions, not because they are not smart enough. Simply, the simple reason is because there's a gap in the theoretical teaching and the practical teachings in places like Africa. You would have students who know the what, understand the what, can explain to you the what, and even the why, but the how becomes a problem because there's not enough resources. I'm minding my language. Resources in the sense of leadership providing these facilities for the students to benefit. So this is encouraging. Back to the main objectives for which this company decided to report some of these items in the annual reports. The second driver was market competition. So the second major reason why companies report some of these things in the annual reports is because the market is doing it. Maybe a competitor has done something similar and has leveraged upon it. So why shouldn't I do same? Then the third reason is voluntarily. And this is interesting in the sense that when you read more on the literature with this kind of research, the Scandinavian region spearheaded this, and the main motivation was voluntary. But my findings is different. The main motivation for reporting some of these things is because in Ghana, the regulator is interested. So in concluding, I generally would want to say human capital risk disclosure in this, in human capital risk disclosure with regards to this presentation, employee welfare risk disclosure, where I beg your pardon, where organizations are being encouraged to do more in their communities is low. This means that there's the urgent need for a comprehensive human capital risk reporting framework by the regulator to encourage the organizations to report more on what they are what they are doing to engage their communities, what they are doing to enrich the experience of the communities they find themselves. This is here because one of the main reasons per the interviews why companies don't report more about their employees, why companies don't report more about what the employees are doing is more or less because there's not a framework that allows them to do so. They don't know how to get the information there out there. There's not a structure that helps them to do it. So some of these things you will find will come across in the comments of, let's say, the CEO or the board chairman. There is not a dedicated chapter or space within the annual report to focus on human capital items. And this we hope to change. And one outcome of this research was to recommend that future researchers could expand the sample size. This began as a research focused on the Ghana Stock Exchange, and then we zoomed into one particular company as a case study because of the unique findings we came across with. And the more this is done, the more probably we would have information about how employees who are not even trained as teachers go out of their way to educate school children, even if it is from finance. In this case, it has led to technology. That's us. I would want to invite questions and then comments. Thank you.
Thanks, Isaac. That's really good. And I'm right on schedule, so thank you for that. Again, as usual, if the audience wants to put up any hands, any questions? I'll start with one, I suppose, Isaac. How far would you say your work is transferable to other countries and sort of markets and things? Is it very much dependent on the Ghana context, or would it be applicable in other countries?
It very much will be applicable in other countries, because what we want to do is come up with a framework. We've identified that the main challenge globally has been the lack of standardization when it comes to human capital reporting. So with this framework that is anchored on 4 main pedestals when it comes to people, competencies, talent development, employee welfare, and organizational justice or equity, we hope that this framework could be used and then replicated elsewhere. A similar one has been done previously with aspects of this framework, where a research was done on the London Stock Exchange in 2016 and 2017. Then there's been another one on the Irish Stock Exchange, which is now part of the European stock market. Yes.
Hi, I got my hand raised.
Yes, Tom, yes.
Okay. Isaac, pleased to meet you, and your talk is very interesting. The one point that hit me square in the face, when you have your little model of the different classes of risks and then a list of different things there, the first thing that strikes me is related to my talk tomorrow. Okay, and it is that each one of these things, in my opinion, can be quantified, can be stated as a measurable variable. This is what I'm going to talk about tomorrow, academic metrics, okay? So a question is, have you tried to quantify any of them, especially the non-obvious soft things like feeling comfortable on the job, that kind of thing? And do you want to try to quantify them, if possible, to make the ideas clearer?
That is a very interesting proposal, Tom. That should mean tomorrow I am supposed to be attending the sports day for my children, but that should mean I shouldn't miss your presentation tomorrow, because I'll be interested in knowing how to look at it. What we have done from a quantitative aspect is just coming up with a framework and then performing a content analysis of the annual reports, but we've not delved deep into the metrics of it as you may want to do tomorrow. So I should be able to.
Okay, here's the thing. Now what I will do, I will, as a backup, I will send you when I get your email the slides, so you have all the ideas, and we are going to record it. But you're very welcome to play with the children and to try to listen to my talk.
Thank you, thank you.
And then later, if you'd like to explore the idea of quantifying some things which are critical, but are just nice sounding words now, I will personally love to help you with it. That's what I do with people. Okay?
Very much so. Okay, Tom. So I would send you my email with the organizers, but I'll drop it in the chats to you as well. Yes.
Thank you. Okay. Well, looking forward to maybe helping you and getting some interesting. I'm very interested in risk in itself, and we can talk about that at a different level. But now I'm just focusing on quantifying the risk factors so that they are clearer ideas, both academically and for business purposes.
Very much so. Good. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Hi, thank you. I found it's a very interesting presentation. In fact, both of your, this and the previous one was very interesting and created some nice thoughts. One concern I had with yours is you're getting this data from the stock exchange. How easy was it to get the data? And also, how is it to get the data in the same form from other stock exchanges? If you see what I mean.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. A very, very good question, Margaret. And, you know, with this, one of the samples we use is the annual reports, which is a public document to start with. So the annual reports should be there on the company's website or within the website of the stock markets, the respective stock markets. But what becomes more problematic is getting behind the figures, interviewing these people who are in charge of the annual report, because they are more high-profile people in organizations, very, very busy people, like the company secretary, like the head of risk, the head of HR. So the interview aspect has been challenging, but I've been able to, through the stock exchange, because they have done some things with the Global Reporting Institute in the past, and they are now becoming more aware about the need to report on some of these issues like sustainability. So though sustainability is a very big word, within it, we have the human capital as well. So we're leveraging on it. I've done about 15 or more interviews, and then I'm building up the data with time.
That's fantastic. Thank you very much. It's very interesting, and I think you're going to get some long-term useful results as well. Thank you.
Thank you.
James, you hand up?
Yes, please. Thanks a lot, Neil, and thanks, Isaac.